What's the worst way you've seen someone get rejected? I always remember an incident when I was around 11. I was picked to go on this summer camp kind of trip for a week with a bunch of kids the year above me. They were 12 and 13-year-olds. This was because of my good behavior. I was the only 11-year-old. There was a boy I'd had a crush on for a while, and on the first day he asked me to be his girlfriend. Obviously, we were all children, so that doesn't even mean anything. But he kept going for the whole week, sending me notes, hugging me in the hall before we were sent to our separate dorms, and then on our last night I got a note asking me to meet him in the hall. When I went out, the entire group was there, like 35 to 40 kids, all crying with laughter. He announced to everyone it had been an entire joke that the whole group had been in on, and he had never been interested in an ugly teacher's pet like me. As an adult, I'm obviously not remotely upset about the romantic rejection, because I was 11. But the social rejection and the public humiliation aspect was tough. Anyway, I'm 24 now, and he slid into my DMs after high school, and I told him to go F himself, which felt good. This happened in the 6th grade. I was bullied badly throughout elementary school. For reasons I still don't understand, I was made a social outcast by the mean girls. I was walking home from school with one of the cool boys in class who was always nice to me one-on-one, but eagerly joined the bullying otherwise. He told me that one of the girls in class was having a party after school and that I should come. I was so excited to be invited to a party with the cool kids. I went home, told my mum, and rode my bike to the girl's house. I rang the doorbell and the whole group answered. One of them said, "Oh my god, she actually came," and they all laughed. Then the girl whose house it was said, "You can go now," and shut the door in my face. I was too ashamed to go back home and tell my mum what had happened, so I rode my bike around aimlessly, crying, for a couple of hours before going home. I'm 35 years old now, and that memory still stings. I'm so grateful that I had a loving home life and social media wasn't around yet. I don't know if I would have made it through otherwise. Don't be bullies, kids. I was having a party for my 13th birthday. I sent my crush an invite. A week after giving them out, I found a bit of torn paper on the school field. I recognized the color and pattern, then looked up, and there was the rest of it, torn into tiny pieces. The kind of tearing that takes time and effort to get it into that many. 10 out of 10 would not be a teenage girl again. I went out for lunch with the dude I had a crush on. I told him I liked him, and he said, "Are you aware of the concept of the friend zone? My friends and I have laughed about this for years." I thought the friend zone was something that people imagined they were in as a weird coping mechanism to being rejected, not a thing that we actively sales-pitched people into being in. Hilarious. When I was 11, the boy I was crushing on said he didn't want to go out with me because I was ugly in front of all of my friends. We ended up getting together in our late teens, and we've now been together for 13 years. He doesn't remember this incident, but he's devastated that he ever said this to me, even as a child. I think that's a reminder of how saying something hurtful to someone like that will stick with the person you said it to for a long time, but the person who said it forgets it with no problem. It's not exactly a rejection, but it was me being completely oblivious and optimistic because a cute boy was nice to me. I met a guy at a club meeting in college who I thought was pretty cute. He invited me to hang out a couple of times to do homework or grab breakfast together in the dining hall and seemed into me. Compliments and lots of eye contact, and he listened to me when I talked, but never made a physical move. But we were both 18-year-old virgins meeting in public places, so it wasn't unreasonable to assume he was just shy, because I certainly was. After a while, he invited me to go see a movie, so I figured that this was like a date, right? I met up with him at the movie theater, and it turned out he was going with a group of people, and it wasn't just the two of us. That should have been a signal, but nope. I spent the first half of the movie trying to snuggle up to him, hold his arm or his hand, to be cute, and I finally started to realize that he was super not into it when I rested my hand on his knee and he picked it up and returned it to my lap. We got out of the theater and he turned to me in front of everyone and said, "You know I'm gay, right?" If the ground could have opened up and swallowed me whole at that moment, I would have welcomed it. I felt awful that I'd spent an hour or so trying to snuggle up with someone who was uncomfortable and too polite to tell me to back off, and I still cringe to think about it now. I got sat down for coffee with my boyfriend of 2 years, and he said, "I'm bored of you now. Let's break up." Then picked up his coffee and left. It tore at me for a while, but I got over it. I'm more angry than anything that he wasted my time. How the frick can people do this to people they've been in relationships with? And long ones. Romantic relationships are so damn scary. I don't want to spend years with someone only for them to easily toss me away. After living with my boyfriend, now ex, for a couple of years, I was going through a bit of a depression. Things started to look up and I was starting to put my life back together. We'd only done the deed a few times in as many months, and he mentioned that when I was ready, he'd like me to initiate. He didn't want to pressure me. Great, he's been super understanding so far, and this just shows how supportive he is. The next day I try to initiate because I have a cool, understanding, supportive boyfriend that I love. He stops me and says, "Don't you want to lose some weight first? I don't want you to be upset if I can't get hard because of your belly flab." Noped out of that relationship real quick. Honestly, it was just absurd enough that I kind of laughed it off and I didn't take it personally. This story is from last year and probably still counts as my most painful and confusing rejection. I'd known a man for several years online and we'd gotten very close. We'd met on World of Warcraft and we played together literally every day for 2 years, talking on Discord, and eventually we started flirting a bit. He was begging me to come visit him, as he lives across the country, unfortunately, and I enthusiastically said yes, because at this point I'm stupidly in love. He spends months going on and on about his feelings for me, how he's always liked me and how he's in love, how I'm so beautiful and he can't wait to kiss me, all that stuff. At this point, he's video chatted with me multiple times and seen many full body pictures of me, so he definitely knows what I look like, which brings me to the weird part. We finally meet, and he treats me like a sister, and seems really uncomfortable with the idea of kissing all of a sudden. The trip was very fun, but I felt very rejected. I tried hugging him when we got back to his place and he was visibly uncomfortable, telling me that he wasn't ready to make a physical move despite him being the one begging me to come to be with him. I felt really rejected and repulsive, and he even sat on a different couch from me across the room despite telling me how much he wanted to cuddle for 2 years. Late that night I asked him what was up and he said that he found our age difference off-putting, which really upset me because he knew my age since the day we met, and he's not even that much older than me. It really felt like a lame excuse. To this day, I have no idea what really happened. My only 2 guesses are that I look fatter in person than he was expecting, or that he had an actual girlfriend somewhere else. I'm still salty about the waste of my time and money. I got ghosted by a guy that I'd been seeing for a year. I saw him at a bar a few months later and he tried to come over and greet me like nothing had happened, but I stuck my hand in his face and walked away. Maybe not the most grown-up thing to do, but he ghosted me, so screw him. Lost my virginity to my boyfriend at the time. 2 days later, he dumped me via text. The whole, "it's not you, it's me" thing. To a freshly 18-year-old girl, though, that obviously meant nothing. There was a happy ending, though. After that, I vowed to never do the deed with someone I couldn't see myself marrying ever again. That's just a personal choice for myself. I have no issue at all with people doing it casually. It just wasn't something I wanted. Sure enough, a year and a half later, at 19 years old, I met a guy that seemed to check all the boxes. I moved forward, deciding that even if we didn't end up married, it was worth it because he showed me how I wanted to be loved by someone. We've been together for 7 years, married for almost 5. A guy told me he only dared to talk to me because I was the ugliest girl in the room. I mean, that's a play, a really crappy play that hopefully never works for anyone who uses it, but what the heck do I know? I've never met someone who's used negging who wasn't also a garbage human being, to be honest. When I was about 14, a new kid came to our school and I made quick friends with him. We played Xbox Live a lot. I developed a quick crush. He texted me to get on live because he needed to tell me something. "Hey, I wanted to tell you that I really like you." I was excited, but pretty sure it was a joke. "Are you messing with me? I really like you, it's not a joke." So I believed him. "Chrissy, will you go out with me?" And I said yes. "April Fools, I'd never go out with you." And then he laughed for a good few minutes. I left the call and was really hurt. He continued to bully me for a few years after that, telling me to self-delete and that I was ugly, and that nobody liked me. He moved away before senior year and I got to actually enjoy it without getting bullied. In 4th grade, my boyfriend broke up with me by slamming a basketball in my face on the crowded playground. Worst period of my life. I'd literally just gotten out of an awful relationship that involved several instances of the unspeakable act, as well as physical attacks. I had rampant PTSD, I knew it, and was foolishly trying to fill the void with alcohol and other people. I met someone on Tinder. He was a medical student and really smart, funny, handsome, and nice to me. I was wary about getting used or hurt again, so I made it my policy not to meet anyone in person that I hadn't spent some time talking to. We texted pretty much non-stop for weeks. I even opened up about my mental health and he was seemingly kind and responsive. We planned a date. The night before we'd planned to go out, he was in the area and invited himself over to my apartment. I insisted that he not come because, as I said, my mental health wasn't in a great place, and my apartment was in a pretty rough shape. But he insisted it was fine, that he didn't mind, that he accepted me and just wanted to spend a bit of time with me. So I had him come by. We talked for a bit, and he started kissing me. One thing led to another, and I don't know, I didn't feel ready for it, but I didn't feel that was important. We ended up doing the deed. It was a nice night, I guess. We talked about our plans for the next night, and it was implied that he was into me and that we'd be seeing each other again. There was no indication whatsoever that anything was wrong on his part. Then he left in the morning. Again, we'd been texting non-stop, and then it just slowed to a halt. He blew off our date. A couple of days later, I asked him what was up, and he essentially said that I was too messy for him and that it had put him off. Then I never heard from him again. Really felt like there was something between us. I'd basically let him earn my trust, and then he bolted once he got the notch in his belt. That really frickin' hurt. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. This is the reverse story. When I was 15, a guy at school asked me out on a date. I assumed he was making fun of me, so I didn't say anything and just walked away. I was pretty proud of my response at that time, considering I usually said something awkward or made things worse when people made fun of me. It didn't occur to me until years later that he might have been serious. I was talking to a guy for a while and finally felt comfortable enough to send him a more risque photo. I didn't send out any fully undressed photos or anything, but I liked this guy, so I gave him something. I sent the photo and he replied back with, got anything better to impress me? His reasoning when I pressed him was, well, you're just so hot. I just wanted you to send more pictures. Nope, I stopped talking to him shortly after. After 22 years of marriage, he said he didn't want to be married anymore. What that translated to was, I am effing your friend. When I was like 11, I used to go to these social dance things with my friends. It wasn't really my deal. I've always been introverted, so they insisted I go. I remember my friends pushing me to ask this guy to dance. I didn't want to, and then he came and asked me. So I said okay. After that night, my friends said it was on a dare, and the dude and his friends came over throughout the night to tell me that I was ugly. So yeah, not really a rejection, but probably one of the worst things that's happened to me regarding the opposite gender. There was a really cute redhead cop or sheriff who used to come into the same gym as me and just walk on the treadmill for 3 to 5 miles every single day. I'd talked to her a few times and she seemed friendly enough, smart too, so I kept talking to her. No real intentions of asking her out, but I did enjoy our banter. Then came this fateful Monday evening. As I was wrapping up my workout and she's walking her 500 miles, just to walk 500 miles, I stopped in for a quick chat. It starts off innocently enough, but pretty quickly she starts spewing some nonsense about leagues and the audacity of certain guys to approach her, and if I'm, referring to me, the best she can do, she's just going to give up on dating altogether. I walked away without saying a word, but she followed me out with some final advice of, I guess you shouldn't talk to me on a Monday, huh? I followed that sage advice, which works so well I've extended it to the rest of the week. Haha, my god. Well, there's not liking unsolicited approaches from strangers, and then there's insulting them when they come up and telling them that they're hideously ugly. I'd say that's going a bit far in the majority of cases. One ex told me he was done now and just wanted to see what it was like dating a black woman. My last ex was a weird roller coaster. He was heavily Christian, outspoken, and pretty haughty about it too, and it came out that he had told me that he has an addiction for all things in the bedroom. Then he said he was getting therapy for it. Then he said he'd been on special interest sites, sending messages and pictures to girls in other states for the duration of our time together. 3 years. After all that, no. Just no. Then almost a year later, homie is seen at a local special bedroom interest event. So I guess therapy's going great. On my books for the oddest breakup I've had, and I'm nearing 30. I think it was freshman year in high school. I just spent the summer in Switzerland, where I'd had the most amazing summer romance with this gorgeous Swiss boy named Bastian. This was the boost I needed to think I might finally be popular and get attention from cute boys at home. There was this boy Jason I'd had a crush on forever, so I just talked to him one day. He was distant, but I kept trying. Then I guess he got sick of me, and he had 2 of his friends find me at my gymnastics gym of all places, and as I was sweaty, exhausted from practice and wearing a leotard, which always made me feel a little conspicuous, they said something like, just so you know, Jason will never be interested in a girl with a small chest and a retard for a brother. And then they laughed as they walked away. My brother has extreme autism, so I'd heard cruel comments before, but it just crushed me. Jason actually saw me at college 5 to 6 years later and apologized. I guess he felt bad about it for years. Oh, this one that happened at 11 years old, definitely. I was asked out on a camp by a boy I liked and I was nervous to hold his hand. He broke up with me literally 20 minutes later because I was nervous. You're not the kind of girl I want to date. Being around you is emotionally exhausting. You radiate negative energy. I was 23, and to be fair, I was really depressed at the time, but geez, my dude. I dated a woman for a year, then she got a job offer and moved across the country to California for work and begged me to come with her. I loved her, so I did. Then she was there for 3 months while I was looking for a job and getting my life sorted to come with. I visited for 2 weeks during this time to be with her, find a place, and interview. The visit was amazing and we talked and video chatted every day I was back in Florida. She was pretty homesick and was having trouble acclimating to everything, but was really looking forward to when I could just be there with her. I landed a job via phone interview and we both celebrated. Early January, I'm packing the truck and getting ready for a cross-country drive, leaving my siblings and parents, all of whom I'm very close with, and then I noticed she sounded weird on the phone. She's being short on the video calls, but I chalk it up to her not being happy since she says she's fine. So I'm stressing, trying to get there to help out. One day into my drive, I was talking to her before bed and she didn't say I love you too like she normally would. I ask her what's going on and she tells me we'll talk when I get there. So now I have days of mindless interstate desert driving to think about what could be going on and what's changed. She's not giving any details, being very short on the phone and refusing to video chat. I'm barely sleeping at night from the stress while also driving 18 hours a day to try and get there as fast as I can. I arrive to sign my apartment lease, half move in, shower, and go to see her since she's now done with work. She's a live-in nanny, so I couldn't move in with her. I knock, she opens the door, and from the look on her face, I know what I've been afraid of for days is true. Our relationship is over. She explains to me over the next week that she's homesick, she's originally from Brazil, and that she wants to go back there to be with her family. Then it comes that she started talking with her ex and is planning on getting back together with him on her return. I'm barely processing my emotions at this point, and just trying to change her mind by spending time together. She has a flight with plans to leave. I get 1 week before she leaves the country. We spend our time together, getting along like we always did, still big chemistry and we're enjoying ourselves, until I'm reminded she's still leaving. 1 week passes, I drive her to the airport and she flew out of my life, leaving me thousands of miles from anyone I cared about. I was deeply depressed. I stayed for the duration of my 6-month lease, doing nothing but work, eat, sleep, and repeat. Then I drove back to Florida. In short, I planned for months, changed jobs, and moved thousands of miles to be with someone, and they left after a week. When I was about 17, I went to the park on a double date with a good friend of mine and 2 guys we'd just met. We'd been there for about 10 minutes when dude 1 suddenly shouts, "I'll bet you $10 I can run through those trees and back in 60 seconds," and he just takes off into the forest. After a few minutes, dude number 2 decides his friend must have gotten lost, runs to his car and just drives away. We never saw or heard from either of those guys again. It was a very strange experience because these guys pursued us, and we're still not sure what made them run for the hills after spending just 10 minutes alone with us. This certainly takes the prize for the strangest answer here. Honestly, I was just relieved to get a breather from people being more awful. I was in love with someone, and I sent him undressed photos because he asked me to. But the last one I sent, looking back, wasn't very flattering, so from then on, he ghosted me. It really broke my heart, like I really thought we could pursue a relationship, and I showed him the most intimate parts of me. I'm a 6'4" female, and it's hard for people to look past my height. I was single for a long time, so I was on Tinder and other sites, and I always had to give people a warning before I met them in person. Tall guys are fine, but apparently tall girls scare people. I've talked to people for weeks and then met up with them, and I can see the shock in their faces, but everything goes really well and afterwards they just end up ghosting me or block me. It's really disheartening. Tall guys usually like short girls, so a lot of the people I was meeting up with were shorter guys. Not always that much shorter than me, but apparently they still had issues with it. I even had someone tell me if I wasn't so tall, I would have been the perfect girlfriend, but they can't deal with the height. I could only take so many of these rejections before it started to really get to my head, so I was done with all that. It's crazy that it's something that I have absolutely no control over. I dated a girl in high school for almost 6 months, and we both lost our virginity to each other. We lived like a 2-minute walk from each other's houses, so we'd hang out every day at her house since her parents were never home. We'd never really talked at school unless it was just a passing comment. One day I went and tried to talk to her and her friends, and she acted like she didn't know me. I got upset and mentioned that we'd been dating for almost 6 months, and she said it was all in my head and that she didn't know who I was. Later that day I was supposed to go to her house. She texted me asking where I was and called me crying because I didn't show up. I broke up with her that day. Who is the most delusional person you've known? I work in a small-town radio station. I've seen a lot of rookies fresh out of broadcast school let the tiny amount of fame they get from being on a small-town radio station go to their head. This one guy came into work one day, madder than hell that small-town radio famous wasn't enough to get him out of a speeding ticket. My brother was always bragging about how chicks he worked with wanted to bang him. Then after 2 or 3 months, when he inevitably quit or got fired, whenever the guys were talking about chicks they hooked up with, he would always talk about these beautiful women that wanted him, which he just never got around to hooking up with. One time, after starting a new job, he comes home all excited and yells, "Holy crap, the receptionist at this place is gorgeous, and guess what? She wants to F me." I said, "Dude, you've been there one day. How do you know she wants to F you?" So he says, "Well, I just walked through the front door, and as I was passing by, she looks me dead in the eye and says, 'Good morning.'" Oh my god, I lost it with that last bit. Good morning equals she wants to bang me? That's the most delusional thing I've ever heard. My current boss. He thinks the business is doing okay or is in a rough spot. He's slowly choking and killing it with his managing. I see the shop closing in mid to late August. Won't you feel stupid when it closes in early September? Seriously though, I hope he turns it around quick and that you don't lose your job, and if you do, I hope you find something quickly. Worked a night job where I met someone who was studying rather than going to school. Eventually I got out of him that he was studying to be a seducer. He studied Cleopatra, Rasputin, Casanova, etc. to learn the art of seduction. Basically, this guy's life plan was to just seduce his way through life. He had an intricate plan on how he was going to seduce our supervisor for a raise, seduce multiple spouses to support him, even how to get free coffee by seducing the barista. He must have done a lot of seducing to keep working that barely over minimum wage night job for years. Sounds like he put his buy into charisma and his dump stat is intelligence. Ah, the charismatic idiot savant playthrough of life. Sounds like this man was trying to go for a path of life that would have got him into the Gold Diggers video we did a few weeks ago. Better luck next time, failed social climber. My aunt, as in my mum's sister. She constantly stirs drama with other people and then calls you out for being mean to her. What the frick, lady? For example, one time I came outside and I see her pull up in her car. She starts chit-chatting to my mum. They're talking about her haircut. I tell my mum we needed to go and she drove away shortly after. Totally fine. I get a call from another relative a week later that she's angry with me because the day she came over I rolled my eyes and she reads lips. She knows I said something about her. This didn't happen. She then continues to post on social media how karma is going to get me, while simultaneously commenting on all of my stuff, saying how cute my daughter is. Delusion. This is my aunt exactly. She's also a drama queen. I visit my family once a year for a week, so I go to see my aunt and my mum at the same time. Every year, my aunt will cause some drama. This year, she launched into a casual conversation with me and just said, "You know your boyfriend kinda looks like a rat?" Told her that's not an okay thing to say. She said the truth hurts to hear. I got angry and left. Next morning, she waltzes in like nothing happened. Asks me to come and give her a hug hello. I say no, explaining that what she said was really hurtful. She then flips her crap and starts screaming, "Why are you always starting stuff up like this? We never get into fights when you're not here, you're always causing trouble." I was so shocked, I just left. A very, very good friend of mine comes from a super rich family. His dad recently bought $1 million home to sell to him for under $300,000. He thinks his family isn't that wealthy and that this isn't that abnormal. There's always been a number of Ask Reddit threads like, "Who's the richest person you know?" and they're always fascinating reading. There are people like your friend who have no idea that it's not normal to be able to buy $1 million home or a yacht without blinking. One of my favorite comments was about a clueless girl from a very rich family who visited an equally rich friend. Friend's daddy had just bought her a huge, gorgeous penthouse apartment in Manhattan. Clueless friend looked around the place and said, "Wow, this is really nice. How much do you think the rent here would be? $1,000 a month?" Then she looked confused when the guy who wrote the story, who wasn't rich, started laughing. "I mean, it's a banana, Michael. What would it cost? $10? For those wondering, penthouse rent in Manhattan is probably somewhere around $15K per month. My little sister. Me and my eldest sister were raised by an alcoholic mother who left us with random people so she could get drunk. When I was about 6, my mum sobered up and had my little sister. The girl is delusional and has adopted the idea that she went through what me and my older sister went through. She recalls memories that never happened. She swears my mum beat her. Never happened. She makes up stories like she was a mortician, traveled around the world, she dated such and had tons of money. It's so weird. She spends every waking moment on Facebook and posts every single thing that goes on in her life. She has a felony, she beat her baby daddy until they broke up, and now both of those psychos have really crappy custody fights going on. I could go on and on. Sounds like a compulsive liar. I dated one of those. Frick all that. My schizophrenic uncle. He ran away from home in the US in his teens to Turkey, converted to Islam, came home a few years later, believed he was the son of God and robbed a bank so that he could give the money to the homeless in the city we live in. He was institutionalized for many years and was released one day with no notice to our family, and died shortly thereafter of an accident caused by his mental illness. Well, I can't fault his intentions. This dude who used to live near me. There's a laundry list of stories, but two gems are when he took those fake billion-dollar bills you can get at Halloween from church groups to Walmart, filled 8 shopping carts with random expensive stuff, mostly electronics, and tried to buy them with the, quote, money. Or when, after the cops were called on him for shooting our much younger brother with an airsoft gun, he grabbed a samurai sword and charged at the cops. Spoiler alert, he got tased. He later told us if they shot at him, he would cut the bullets in half, like Ryan Reynolds did in X-Men Origins Wolverine. That dude is lucky he didn't get shot. I realize the dude was probably white. That said, getting shot by the police can happen to anyone, and if you try to attack a police officer with a potentially lethal weapon, you can reasonably expect for it to happen to you. The cops understood that their bullets were of no use in the situation. He had been studying the blade since he was but a child. My ex-boyfriend plays the victim to his friends and family, yet I've spoken to 2 of his exes and we've all called the cops on him at some point. He obsesses and stalks and plays weird games. He tried to break into my apartment once after we broke up to apologize to me and tried to convince my roommate I was unstable and making rash choices. We've been broken up 7 months now. I have a new boyfriend and he still sends me emails saying I'm being unreasonable. This reminds me of my uncle. 3 out of 4 of his wives have literally fled from him in the dead of night. One of them took their daughter and sought asylum in Germany, where her mother was a citizen. He's a criminal and a sociopath, but neither he nor my grandparents see it. Some years ago, my grandfather had to get triple bypass surgery. There were some complications. He was in the hospital for months, and no one knew if he was ever going to make it out again. When he finally did, he discovered that the same uncle had stolen over $1 million from him over the months he was in hospice. Did my grandfather finally see him for what he was? Nope. He blamed my uncle's most recent ex-wife, calling her the criminal mastermind. She was the stupidest woman I've ever met, but at least she was smart enough to get away from him. Met a guy in the psych ward with psychosis who believed that he was a prophet. Really nice guy. I've a quote written by him. "Madness is not pure error, it is nature's dissatisfaction with genius." My grandmother was a psych nurse in a ward years ago, and she encountered a patient who was convinced he was the second coming of Jesus. He even walked like Jesus. She said, "If I hadn't known he was nuts, I might have believed him." Back in the day when mental health experiments were just doctors saying, "I wonder what happens when we combine these specific types of crazy people," there was a case where doctors put 3 second coming of Jesus guys together to see what would happen. Anticlimactically, each of the 3 merely thought the other 2 were poor, deluded souls. I wanted them to merge into one super prophet. We are Threesus. I would like to thank everyone who combined their stories into that last exchange. The humor can be hard to come by in scripts about the mentally ill or deluded. I spent the first 11 months of my army career with this one guy who had absolutely no idea that everybody hated him. He had this horrible personality where he talked too loud, said frick all the time, stole crap, and fricked with other people's stuff, and just seemed kind of like an alien trying to mimic heterosexual male interactions. But the alien had only studied bad sports movies and war films. He was incredibly cringy. Guy was raised by a single mother that clearly allowed him to get away with anything, and in 11 months I knew him, I never once heard him take responsibility for anything. An example, we'll call him PH for dialogue purposes. We're in the lunch line and he gets a big bowl of clam chowder soup, he spills a little over the side of the bowl and onto the tray, and we're like, looks like you spilled a bit. Keep in mind we saw him spill it. PH? No, I didn't spill it. Well, who spilled it then? Frick, I don't frickin' know. I guess someone frickin' knocked me and made the bowl spill. As I said, he swore all the time. You know you swear too much when a bunch of army dudes think you swear too much. Yeah, literally couldn't take responsibility for spilling a little bit of soup in a tray. As said though, the most delusional aspect of his personality was his complete inability to accept that nobody liked him. When our final course, combat engineer training, finished, and we were all about to get posted off to our respective units and bases across the country, he'd always talk about how he was going to hang with the people who were going to the same place as him and maybe be roommates with one of them. To a man, each one of them never wanted to see him ever again. It took on average about 2 weeks from the point of meeting him to completely despise him, and he was never once aware or willing to admit this. As said by one of our sergeants at the end of our course, at the course party, "That kid's a frickin' lunatic." Couldn't have said it better myself. Are you talking about Sterling Archer? Isn't it funny how we all love Archer, but if he were real and we were friends with him, we would just think he's a pathetic idiot. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My cousin has insisted to my family that I get exercised because I'm gay and autistic. She thinks that only the devil himself can corrupt someone to my extent. The problems with her theory are that I'm neither gay nor autistic, and she's the one touched by Satan. This reminds me of that Yahoo Answers post where someone said his mom made him wear a butt plug at all times when he was 5, or Satan would violate him and make him gay. That's nowhere near as bad as that Facebook trend where moms would give their wee kids bleach enemas and then point at the shredded colon lining and say, "Look at that big worm that came out of him. That's what caused his autism." People are effed. Guy at my college thought he was God's gift to women just because he worked out daily. He looked more like an albino Dwayne Johnson with curly hair. It was like Casper took roids and started hitting on anything that moved. That last sentence made me really feel like I could hate him and be justified in doing so. I love unrepentant buttholes that I can take out all of the rage I have stored up from my day-to-day life on. Mine is my boyfriend's best friend in the whole world, and he's a frickin' nutter. Sometimes it's funny to hear him explain his theories, but other times it's sad and frustrating. I care about him, but often worry that he may be mentally ill. A few examples: that the Earth is flat and that NASA and all the other scientists are in on the secret and want to keep it from the public. They don't want us to know because it somehow directly proves God's existence, and they don't want that. All ice cream starts as vanilla ice cream until you add flavors to it. He thinks the absence of added flavor is vanilla. The government uses airplanes to spray us all with metal particles that makes people have autism. Also related, he doesn't believe that regular clouds are made out of water vapor. He thinks that semen never leave the female body after people do the deed and that it collects in the uterus somewhere. If a woman does the deed with multiple men over the course of her life, then her child will genetically be a mixture of all those men. This is why he thinks God wants us to only do the deed with our husband or wife. Do I even need to keep going? Okay then, prior to his flat earth theory where he believed in space and NASA and whatnot, he saw a photo of what looked like the claw or hand of a Jurassic Park dinosaur in the corner of a photo taken from Mars. This was clearly a clickbait bullcrap internet photo, but he believed it to be real. He said, "I think they got the whole creature on camera, but they're just showing a hand so that we don't all freak out at once." He told me that he thought keto diet was just fat. Yes, you heard that right, just fat. I told him that's borderline impossible because if you were to eat just fat, you'd essentially just be eating olive oil and butter. So not only would you crap your brains out, you'd also never get any vitamins or nutrients, which you need to live. He didn't understand. In a religious debate, how can you prove that Christianity is the religion of truth if every other religion believes it is the truth? I told him it isn't solid evidence to use the Bible, because most religions have their own sacred scriptures that refute the Bible. If everyone believes their book, using yours won't make a difference. He told me I was being hormonal, and that's why I didn't see eye to eye with him. Are you satisfied yet? Alright, a few more because it feels great to get a chance to share some of these. He recently informed me that God taught him that watering your grass will make it green. I told him that that was just standard lawn maintenance and general knowledge, but he argued that only those who know the Lord take the time to water their lawns. He doesn't understand what door-to-door salesmen are. One was at his house asking his grandfather, the homeowner, for some info to complete an order he was making. He wanted his name, phone number, and the exact address. My friend thought it was incredibly suspicious that he just showed up, even though the guy had on a uniform and a marked vehicle, so he called the cops, who were very confused when they arrived. He firmly believes that fat people are fat because of cake. Not trans fats, not excess sugar, not hidden calories and misleading portion sizes, just cake. If you try to pry further, he'll explain that there's nowhere you can go where you can't buy some form of cake. It's delicious and horrible for you. That's why people are so fat, 'cause cake is too yummy and too easy to get. When I tried to tell him that in that way he's right, but it's more of an issue of junk food rather than just the cake, he said, "You wouldn't know because you've never been fat. I have, so I would know." We'll end this with my boyfriend's favorite. He thinks that the birds outside his window are watching him. Keep in mind, his house is 2 floors and he's on the 2nd floor, which is right at eye level with the tree in the front yard, which has a huge bird feeder. And yet he thinks that for whatever reason, these birds are obsessed with him and watch him 24/7. I can't decide if I want to watch nothing but this man's life on TV, or if I've already heard way too much about him. This is why you need to get off the internet and go outside from time to time, people. After this video, of course. It's the vanilla ice cream part of the story that's really bothering me. It makes sense to someone who just barely understands language and flavors because we use vanilla to describe something that's plain. But really, it's not that hard to look up the actual plant it comes from, so they're not only operating on extremely basic understandings, they're clearly refusing to even attempt to enhance it. My little sister, who somehow got it into her head that we grew up in the ghetto. We didn't, and that it is okay to just keep popping out kids with different baby daddies because if God didn't want me to have babies, he wouldn't let me get pregnant. Oh my freaking god, I want to hit her in the face every time she says something like this. By the way, she's now pregnant with her 5th child, right after being a complete hypocrite when she got pregnant last year and had a termination because she wanted a girl. She's finally having her girl, so hopefully she stops. And before I get a bunch of angry messages, she lives off the government. Baby daddies do not support their kids, so she brags about being a hustler. My uncle decided his thoughts were so profound, he tried selling printed canvases with some of his quotes on them. Yes, sentences he came up with himself. And no, he's not successful or any sort of leader in his field, nor anything that would warrant quoting or displaying anything he's ever said. He also decided to write a book of his life, of which he's achieved sucking my auntie dry of money and contact with her family because none of us want to be around him. Spiritually pious and delusions of grandeur. My father. The man does not live in the same reality as the rest of us. He's almost 60 and thinks he's going to make it in the music business, despite the fact that he has no band and plays no gigs. He's a passable guitar player, but the typical guy that had a band in the 70s and early 80s. Takes himself way too seriously as if he's some kind of prolific musician. He took some mediocre pictures of the band Genesis in the 80s and has called himself a photographer since then. He built himself and a couple of friends some very primitive websites and calls himself a web designer. He took a, as in one, class on sound engineering at the community college in like 1980 and calls himself a sound engineer. He even has a couple of video cameras and knows the basics of video editing and now bills himself as a videographer for local bands. The man just makes crap up to make himself seem important. He hasn't had an actual job in 13 years. He's been self-employed in that time, but you need to have actual clients and stuff. He thinks he's above everyone, the smartest guy in the room, and he's just this grand person. It's ridiculous. I don't know how his wife puts up with it. An ex-friend of mine cried multiple times because she thought guys were only interested in me and not her, and that I must be doing something insane to attract their attention since she's the skinnier and more obsessed with her looks one. My guess, her personality was probably repulsive after 2 weeks tops. I'm guessing she was clingy too. She probably also wasn't nearly as attractive as she thought she was and confused skinny with hot. Definitely my uncle. He claims to be the descendant of some wealthy noble family from Germany and goes around genealogy websites adding himself and my grandmother to said family, claiming she's a princess. Not my dad though, he doesn't count. This is only the latest one. He's also pretended to be a priest and a diplomat at some point, as well as having several diseases, so he could get money, sympathy from people, and heavy prescription drugs. HIV, melanoma, Parkinson's, the list goes on. We tried having him admitted, but he always gets discharged a day or two later, since he's very good at convincing everyone that he's fine and that it's us who wants him out of the picture. Man, I thought most of these would be funny, but now I'm kind of sad. It's terrifying to think that people can go their whole lives, their one-shot at existence, being so sheltered and afraid. What a bummer. My friend's ex went off her bipolar meds because she was convinced that love was the cure to her bipolar disorder. I feel better now, so that means I don't need my meds anymore. Bipolar isn't a bacterial infection. You don't take meds for a while and then you're cured of it. Weirdly, they broke up after about the millionth violent mood swing, and now she spends her days getting fired from every single job and doing hallucinogenics. Both my aunt and uncle on my mum's side of the family, mum's brother and his wife, my grandmother's health was declining and my uncle fully supported my aunt so she didn't work. Instead of putting my grandmother in a home, they offered to move her into their house so my aunt could take care of her. Meanwhile, my mum was in the process of divorcing my dad, selling the house, and working 70 hours a week to keep up at a job she hated. In the midst of all that, my aunt asked if my mum could come over to be with my grandmother on the day she was meeting with the lawyer to finalize her divorce. Mum said she couldn't make it, and my aunt told her that if she really loved her mother, she'd make time and would move her appointment with the lawyer, even though she came to the house every day after work to see her. Finally, my mum admitted to my uncle, her brother, that she was suicidal and wanted a way out. He then proceeded to tell her that she was a horrible person and was useless because she didn't want to help. That was years ago, and no one in my family has said a word to them since. We've all moved on and are very happy without them. What's the best loophole that you've ever found? I coach a high school team. We recently bought airfare with Spirit Airlines to take 9 students to a competition. 2 of the students cancelled about a month out from the trip, and we had to replace them with 2 different students. Spirit Airlines policy, no name changes. Can't even pay a fee to change the name. The tickets are basically lost. I have to buy new tickets. Spirit's customer service is overseas and they plainly don't care at all about customer service because they don't actually work for Spirit, etc., etc. Except that Spirit Airlines does allow passengers to correct misspellings, and these folks don't really recognize nonsense names. So over 4 calls, I changed the names of the cancelled students to the names of the new students, 2 letters at a time. No one at Spirit customer service made a note because who would care, and no one ever notices that the correct names during the intermediate steps were nonsense. Also, F Spirit Airlines. Some new magazine was asking college students to send out subscription forms by email to all their friends. For each 25 emails you sent, you'd get a $10 Amazon gift card. Turns out they didn't need to be real emails. I made about $100 before they told me to stop. At my university, there was a command which you could use on their Unix systems to get a list of all the email addresses in the university, which is why I guess my university email was always spammed. I wasn't hacking, they just didn't set up user permissions properly. My justification as to why it's not hacking is that we had authorization to log into the system with our own user accounts, and the command we used is a thoroughly documented, supported operating system command used with its intended purpose. We also did tell the admins because we were sick of our email being spammed too. There's really no difference between performing whatever command it was, I forget now, and is, cd, touch, ifconfig and so on and so forth. Bonus shady loophole though, on my CS assignments the professors would use the Unix timestamps as submission times, and if I noticed I made a mistake on my homework, I could set the timestamp on my homework assignments using the touch command. In first grade, our school had Catch a Kid cards. Every time you did something good, you'd get one. Whoever had the most at the end of the year won a prize. My teacher, to promote animal awareness or some crap, gave us 1 card for each newspaper story we brought in that had something to do with animals. So instead of being a good kid and doing good deeds, I just combed through the newspaper each day and hoarded cards through animal stories. Eventually she was like, "Alright, for frick's sake, you're only getting half a card for each story." And I was like, "Miss Fives, I do not give a frick," and continued bringing in the stories. I destroyed all the competition and won the grand prize of a $50 Toys R Us gift card, which, when converted from 6-year-old dollars into US dollars, is about $24,500. Yes, that sounds like something the young narrator would have done as well. I think $50 when I was a kid would have purchased enough cheap plastic knickknacks to fill an entire closet and make all of my friends jealous. Best Buy had double trade-in value on games several times. Craigslist people want cash instead of store credit, but used games for $20 get $25 in trade-in, which doubled to our $50 store credit. I ended up with about $1,200 in store credit, which cost me maybe $400. My old bank used to give me $2 reimbursement any time I used another bank's ATM to cover the fee. There was a local bank ATM that charged a $1.50 fee, so I would make 50 cents 3 times a month. I assume they had a max on this, or I'd just sit at the ATM all day. Assuming 30 seconds per transaction, you're making $60 an hour running the ATM. I could only do it 3 times per month. So what are you doing now that you have all that extra scratch? How many islands do you own? Years ago, I signed up for the Columbia House DVD of the month when I was 16. Most of you probably don't know about this, but it was a deal where you get a dozen DVDs for free and then had to buy one a month for $15. If you didn't order a movie that month, they would send you one that was their selection of the month. Anyway, when I got all the free movies, I wrote them a letter stating I wasn't 18 and they cancelled my subscription and let me keep the movies for free. Also, back then you could just sign up with a fake name. It was a simpler time. I would sign up for those CD clubs and get the initial shipment with the commitment to buy more and an auto-shipped selection of the month. You could return a form to refuse the selection, or they would send it to you automatically. Inside the auto-shipped package would be a couple of coupons for 2 more free CDs. I'd get the auto-shipped package, open it, take the coupons, and then glue the package closed and mark it Return to Sender. Ended up scoring a couple dozen more free CDs that way before they stopped auto-shipping me the monthly selection. Back when I was much younger, maybe around 8 or 9, my stepfather, notorious spicy food connoisseur, dared me to eat a chili pepper. After I refused, he told me that if I could eat the whole thing, he'd buy me an Xbox. He hadn't said anything about chewing, so I cut the pepper into 3 and swallowed them whole with some milk. Always to keep his word, he bought me an Xbox the following day. My stepdad doesn't play video games and has admitted he wouldn't think to do it, which is why he made that deal in the first place. I work at McDonald's. The first thing that comes to mind is the one time when a guy ordered a 50-cent cone in a cup and Oreo crumbs on the side. He mixed it together right there at the counter and made a cheap version of a McFlurry, which is $2.50. I'll throw in another story for good measure. A lady wanted a McChicken meal, McChicken sandwich, medium fries, medium drink, but wanted all the contents ordered separately. On the screen there's a meal button that groups everything together. Ordering everything separately made it like $1 cheaper. If you do your own brake job, you can buy brakes from AutoZone that include a warranty. This warranty just so happens to cover normal wear and tear. Every time you need new brakes, bring in the worn-out ones and you get a new set for free. Seriously amazing. When Verizon changed their unlimited plan, we got to keep ours due to being grandfathered in. Basically, as long as we kept our phones, we kept the plan. But once we upgraded, we would have to switch plans. My family has 4 phones, 3 smartphones and my little brother's dumb phone with no data. After we went to upgrade, we asked the Verizon rep if there was a way we could keep unlimited. After some experimenting with the system, we found a way. She moved my data package to my brother's phone since he didn't have any data, upgraded my phone, then moved the data package back. Same for my parents' phones. So we got to keep the unlimited and we still got our upgrade. Screw you Verizon, but major props to your employees. I also have Verizon. However, I think they blocked this loophole. However, you can get new old phones or used ones and swap out the SIM card. I've done this twice. I earn double points on my credit card through gas and grocery purchases. So when I plan to buy something, say at Lowe's or go out to eat, I go to the grocery store and buy a gift card. Double points for the gift card and at least double fuel points through the grocery store. There was a McDonald's near my college and in it was an ATM. If you used the ATM and got a receipt, it would come with a coupon for a buy one, get one free large sandwich. I'd swipe my card, hit cancel, and a receipt would print out showing the cancellation. I would then find someone in line buying a large sandwich and hand it over to them. Free sandwiches for about 8 months until it finally went away. I don't eat at McDonald's anymore. Watched a guy do this over the course of about 1.5 years when I worked for a credit card company. The guy was getting a divorce but wanted to hide some of the money from his soon-to-be ex-wife. So he overpaid his credit card by $80,000. He then called us to issue a check for the money, so on his statements it would reflect a zero balance. But he would never cash the check, so it would come back on our books. Every 6 months, the balance would return and he would call to have a new check issued so it looked like an accounting error. From what I understood, the lawyer only reviewed a couple of months' worth of credit card statements, and he timed the issuance of the check just right so no one was the wiser. He called and spoke to a guy on my team and told him the whole story, and then we issued the check for the last time and never heard from him again. I used to work as a teller for a credit union. Guy would do the same thing. We would cut cashier checks out to a neutral account, so he just took all of his money as cashier checks payable to himself. Came in on the 6 months mark to recut the checks. Hid so much money from his wife. When I first got an iPhone, I brought an insurance package that I thought covered just about anything. After about a month of having my new iPhone, I got a really bad scratch on the screen. The scratch haunted me and would constantly imagine a nice fresh screen again, so I went to the insurance company and asked them to replace it. The insurance rep told me my coverage is limited to more severe damage like cracks and water damage, not scratches. So naturally, I went into the parking lot and tanked my phone against the pavement, completely obliterating the screen. I walked back into the same insurance rep, acted like I wasn't there 5 minutes ago, and explained that my phone was severely damaged and I wanted a replacement. In 4 days, I had a nice smooth iPhone free of charge, this time with a screen protector. Not my find, but my mother's. Back in the day, when a woman needed her husband's permission to get a loan or sign up for a credit card, my mother used to take advantage of the "sign up for our store credit today and get X gift for free." She would fill out the form completely, but since my father refused to sign the permission section because he thought it was stupid that she would need permission from her husband in the first place, the credit card company would throw out her application, so she would get the free gift either way. She must have done this a dozen or more times. Yes, game the patriarchy, madam. Game it for all it's worth. Oh, and the credit card companies as well, I suppose. Double win. Not my loophole, but whatever. The American government wanted, and still wants, people to use $1 coins instead of notes, so they started selling $1 coins for $1. People used their credit cards to buy $100,000 worth of coins and then immediately deposited them all into their bank, taking them out of circulation again, to pay off their credit card and then reap the rewards from the credit card usage, usually in the realms of frequent flyer miles. People were accumulating millions of dollars worth of airline travel for free. You're forgetting an important part of the loophole: free shipping. In order to encourage wider distribution of the coins, the US Mint offered free shipping on orders of coins. So basically, order coins from the US Mint with a rewards credit card, then have them shipped for free to you, then take them to the bank immediately upon receiving them. No cost to you, and you rack up the points. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Oh, I have a good one. I'd saved up a crap load of coins and I needed to get them counted. I went to a bank that I knew had a coin counter, mine didn't, and asked the staff if I could use it if I belonged to another bank. She said sure, so I did. It was about $800+ when all was counted. I took my slip to the counter and she asked if I had an account with them. I explained I didn't, but the lady at the front said I could use it. She comes over, B-word, and says she didn't realize I didn't have an account here. What the frick? I would need to pay 20% of all my coins total. I was fuming for about 5 seconds, then I turned to the teller and said, "I'd like to open an account, please." She was teed off, but she sent me to the other section to open an account. I deposited the money into my account, waited until I got my card, withdrew it, and went in and closed the account. It was a lengthy workaround, but it worked. 20%? Oh my god, I would have done that too. What a load of crap. Always wanted to tell people about this or write into Nintendo Power, and I never had the chance. This goes back to the days of Game Boy. I learned one day while playing Final Fantasy Adventure that you could max out your levels through a simple trick. 1. When one of your characters would gain a new level, do not move from your existing position and immediately save the game. 2. Then press B, A, Start, Select, which would cause the Game Boy to reset. 3. Load up the game where you saved and you will immediately get attacked by the same monster that you leveled up from last time. Upon killing him, the same character who got leveled up previously will level up again. Rinse, repeat. It's old and no one cares, but I feel like I finally got to spread the word on this one, and I can die happy. Winn-Dixie had Skittles buy one get one free. At the register, when you scanned a pack of sour Skittles, a manufacturer's coupon for a free bag of Skittles would come out of the register. So as long as they were separate transactions, you could use the cup from the previous transaction on the current one, so on and so forth. I bought a whole case of both, paying 12 cents for tax for each transaction. Most hotels will charge you if you cancel a booking within 48 hours of your scheduled stay. You can reschedule your booking for free though and move it outside of the 48-hour block and then cancel for free. This year, I have casually found a vending machine near my house that has a little bug. If I insert my money and repeatedly press the button for a Fanta, the machine gives me 2 Fanta instead of 1. Now I always go for that vending machine. It wasn't a loophole, but once at the airport I wanted some soda at the vending machine. I inserted the money and I didn't get 1 soda, I got 4. Like seriously, I was literally screaming to my friends, "I got 4 of these!" In the airport, I never won any lottery or whatever. Vending machines often don't want to give me the food I just bought. But that day, I was victorious. I'd beaten the machine. And now I have the image in my head of you chugging all of them next to an impatient TSA agent because he wouldn't let you bring them on the plane. My high school advanced algebra teacher had a system where you could retake an exam if you failed. Part of this was if you were to tutor someone who failed, and then subsequently passed because of your help, you'd get half of their improvement added to your score. So the smartest girl in the class and I took turns getting zeros on exams and then tutoring each other. When I was in elementary school, I took part in a paper airplane contest in which whoever's paper airplane flew the furthest won. We had unlimited pieces of paper at our disposal and about 10 minutes to craft our planes. I noticed some other kids had airplanes that flew quite a bit further than mine, but still not very far, so I basically crunched all of my failed planes into a dense paper ball and just chucked it. It went almost 4 times as far as my nearest competitor. We had the same project for a public administration class in college. The project was more about the other stuff that went along with it than the competition, but you got a big boost for winning it. There was no restriction on what materials could be used, just on the cost of the plane. We just wrapped paper around a baseball and had the college's starting pitcher, who was on our team, toss it. We got the credit, but so did second place, and my friend who took the class the following year said they had a lot more restrictions on their project. When our whole Algebra 2 class figured out how grading on a curve works and statistically used it to our advantage, average grade in our finals was a 52%, so the whole class passed without really even trying on it. Went to Walmart to buy a shotgun which required proof of residency, and my driver's license had a P.O. box, so they wouldn't accept it. I asked what documents could be used as a proof of residency. Turns out a fishing license counts. Does Walmart sell fishing licenses at the same sporting goods desk? Yes, they do. Document needed to get a fishing license? A driver's license. A Walmart sporting goods associate filled out the paperwork for my fishing license, for which I provided my physical address and then handed it over to me. I handed it back and said, "Now, I'd like to purchase that shotgun." The look on their face was priceless, but a few minutes later I walked out with it. Got a similar FU story from Disney World. We were at Epcot and it had been pouring rain all day. Mostly we'd just been hanging out under a pavilion. Finally, we decided to head back when it slacked up, but being Florida, it started pouring again. Ducked into the Mexican restaurant there to wait it out and get dinner. Asked the hostess for a table for 3. "I'm sorry, we're on reservations only tonight." "Okay, fine." I pulled out my phone and checked their website. Sure enough, they had a reservation open for that time. Quickly made the reservation, looked at the hostess and said, "Yes, reservation for 3, name of Sparkstalker." She just glared at me while I smiled like an idiot. My dad went to Walmart with my little brother to return a video game. The game was open, so they said he could only exchange the game for the same one. He says, "Okay," and gets a new unopened video game. He then, with game in hand, looks at the same person and says, "I'd like to return this game, please." They actually let him do it. You know, of all the places that deserve to be gamed by multiple people repeatedly, Walmart is definitely up there. Let them have it. Back in middle school and high school, I was busted at home for looking at adult flicks. My parents had the MSN browser and internet service at the time. Their response was to ground me and change the password to get on the MSN account. This is during the years of dial-up. I discovered that I could type in any random digits into the password space to allow MSN to start the dial-up process and then minimize the window. The computer would connect to the internet, but not the MSN account. I would then open Internet Explorer and browse to my heart and hand's content, erase the internet history, and they were none the wiser. When Radio Shack had open locations nearby, I'd buy cheap $8 to $10 earbuds, and later cheap $10 to $20 pairs of over-ear headphones and get a warranty on them. Whether it was the quality of the stuff or me being an idiot, these would never last me more than a month or 2, so I'd go back, buy the same pair for a huge discount thanks to the warranty, and put a new warranty on those. Repeat, get $2 to $3 sets of earbuds and headphones forever. Or at least until all the Radio Shacks near me closed down. I guess this is kind of a loophole? One of my proudest moments nonetheless. In the final semester of my senior year in high school, I decided to take a class called Physics 2. I liked the first physics class I took. I thought this would be a fun class to go out on. Wrong. It was basically AP Physics. I was in way over my head. It's just that physics was a subject I couldn't easily understand. I failed a lot of tests. At the end of the semester, I had a D- going into the final. I'm freaking out at this point, thinking that my college acceptance is going to be pulled. Our final project is about buoyancy. The task is to build a boat that could support you and your partner out of nothing but cardboard, glue, and 20 feet of duct tape. If you could paddle to the end of a pool and back with you and your partner in the boat, you get an A on that aspect of the project. Great! Then my teacher made the mistake of offering extra incentive. For every length of the pool you could go beyond that without sinking, you'd get 40 extra credit points. Extra credit was my only hope. We went out and found the sturdiest cardboard we could find. We carefully folded, glued, and cut the cardboard into a canoe-type boat. It looked great. The day finally came, my entire class brought their boats out and we started. Most people made it to the end of the pool before their boats started to disintegrate. One group made it back and forth 13 times before they sank. Whoa! We were the very last team. We go in and start paddling. We make it to the end and paddle back. Then out and back again, and again, and again. We crossed the pool 60 times before our teacher made us stop. We didn't sink, and we both earned 2,400 extra credit points. I went from a D- to an A on the very last final I ever had in school. True story and one of my greatest days. When I was in high school, we figured out that we could use the Hooked on Phonics automated toll-free number to make free phone calls from payphones. We would dial 1-800-ABC-DEFG, and once prompted, we would enter 1, 2, 3, 4 3 times. The calls would then drop and we would get a dial tone, and then could call anyone we wanted to. Probably saved a good $4.75 with that one. Several years back, McDonald's started offering free Big Macs if you went online and completed a survey. At the end of the survey, the site would give you a coupon code, write the code onto the receipt, and the receipt becomes a coupon for a free Big Mac. A few years ago, I made 2 back-to-back purchases, thus getting 2 receipts. After completing both surveys, I was given the same coupon code for both receipts, and both of them worked at the register. I got 2 free Big Macs. Over time and with some casual experimentation, I realized that the coupon codes didn't seem to expire. I started saving a few bucks by finding discarded McDonald's receipts on the ground, writing the code on it, and getting a free Big Mac. It's been about 3 years since I made this discovery, and the coupon code still works. I haven't paid for a Big Mac in 3 years. Walgreens was running a deal on a blood sugar monitor that was originally $19.99. They had a weekly deal where it dropped down to $9.99, plus you got 2,000 points free on your balance reward card. I found a coupon for that exact meter which got me $10 off, so the meter became free. Plus I got $2 in balance points. I have about 20 meters sitting in my house that will be going to a lower-income clinic where people who need it but can't afford it will benefit the most from it. This site that delivers pretty good quality frozen food had a really good temporary sign-up deal. Put $50 of food in your cart, sign up with a new account, and they'd take $30 off plus free shipping. This stacked with the current deals like 4 packages of filled pasta for $5 and massive frick-off chocolate cake plus liter of ice cream plus raspberries for $20. I've moved out of home but only 5 to 10 minutes away from my parents. Either the place didn't notice or didn't care that the same credit card placed 2 orders for 2 different names and addresses. That cake was great. What's the biggest dating WTF that you've ever experienced? Had a Tinder date and the guy bought his girlfriend and asked for a threesome without saying a word about it in advance. I gotta wonder how many times he's tried that and what the success rate is. I'm choosing to believe that he didn't even tell the girlfriend about it in advance. He just turned up and said, "Ladies, I've got a proposition for you." Girl told me within 15 minutes of our first meeting that she was doing the deed with a married coworker, and her favorite part was seeing him cry with guilt after it was over. Holy crap, not only doing that but bringing it up on a date 15 minutes in. This is the first comment that actually makes me really mad. Yeah, usually something you bring up on the second date. I think I would literally just get up and leave without saying a word, like I'd never seen her before. 1. She was so wrapped up in her phone that she didn't notice I'd moved over and started a conversation with some other guests. 2. Asked if she could bring a friend to feel safe, completely understandable, and I was fine with it. She brought her best friend and her date. Both girls ignored us pretty much all night and we left without them. He turned out to be a pretty cool guy though, and he invited me to join for weekend football, where I made even more friends. Maybe she just wanted free food. I've heard stories of people that meet online and go on dates and their date just doesn't interact with them. Like one-word answers, on their phone, no eye contact, orders anything they want, being rude, etc. I once got catfished on Tinder. Nothing out of the ordinary, right? This person had me meet them and acted as if they were not a different person. One of the craziest experiences of my life. You got catfished and gaslighted at the same time? Gasfished? Catlighted? Gatflished. A girl I'd been seeing for a couple of weeks or so asked me to go with her to a funeral of some guy that I didn't know. What I didn't expect was that the funeral was for her fiancé. I got out of there real quick once I realized why everyone was shooting me glares the whole time. I was the side piece. This story is just so wildly uncomfortable and horrifying that if I ever accompany a date to a funeral, I'm going to be checking in advance to see if the venue has a built-in ejector seat for the guests before I confirm.
If anything, they should have been shooting her those glares. Who brings a date to their fiancé's funeral?
My wife likes to ask me silly questions like, "Would you cry at my funeral?" To curb this one, my response was, "Well, I wouldn't want to look like a B-word in front of my new girlfriend." I'm quite proud of this one. Beehive Girl. She had a Marge Simpson hairdo about 18 inches high. She was an actor and couldn't understand why roles would demand that she cut her hair, so she turned them down. I went on 3 dates with her just to hear her stories. She was totally oblivious that she was the problem. It was like I was watching a soap opera or something, but she was serious.
This could be a pretty amazing Seinfeld episode.
I went on a Tinder date with this one girl whose bio said something like,
"You won't like me, I'm a disaster."
Spoiler alert, she was right. But she was pretty attractive, so we went to get tea at a local hipster joint. She was obviously depressed. She told me about her hyper-competent other personality that she sometimes slips into and how her current life goal was to move several states away from her family and work at a gas station, even though she was a senior bio major. As the date was ending, she freaked out, saying that she forgot her backpack in her last class but doesn't have a car to get back. Apparently her mum dropped her off and then went home, half an hour away in the suburbs. So I took her to get her backpack, then she told me that she needed me to drive to her house because it was late and no bus was running there. So I drove her half an hour back to her parents' house in the suburbs. On the way, she told me that she actually has a boyfriend, but sometimes she likes to see what's out there, and that this is what our date was. Oh, and she's also pretty sure she's a lesbian, but likes the power involved in getting a guy to like her. For some reason, we never saw each other again.
That's a pretty good example of the term crappy person.
The setup for the comeback is real, though. Too bad it didn't work out this time, huh? Drop her at the curb?
How did you keep from dumping her at the closest 7-Eleven and heading for a bar? At least you're not the boyfriend, so I guess life could have been worse.
I had a guy ask me out on a date and he suggested a Japanese restaurant I liked. After I ordered, the server asked him what he wanted and he said he wasn't hungry. I asked him if he wanted to wait until he was hungry, but he said no, he just wanted to watch me eat. I laughed nervously, thinking it was a joke, but his expression said he wasn't joking. The sushi was good though. Because people are asking, I paid for my food at the end and he didn't offer. If he paid, I would have felt crazy guilty rather than being weirded out.
No second date, I take it.
Nope, but my relationship with that Japanese restaurant is still going strong. This guy went on and on about how he hated promiscuity and whores. Later on that night, he tried to go up my shirt and touch my chest. I stopped him and said, "I thought you hated promiscuity."
Oh, he was using code for, "I hate girls that won't sleep with me."
My ex in high school asked me to shave every last hair on my body. Like everything except for my eyebrows. I refused, so she dumped me. She's now married to a guy with alopecia. No joke.
Hey, I guess there's someone out there for everyone.
But they don't have eyebrows. She's probably still hunting for the perfect mate.
Could always Sharpie those bad boys on.
I think I was like 17 or 18 at the time. We were fooling around. He starts suckling on me and says, in a baby voice,
"Baby, what's his milky?"
I really hope you busted out laughing. This sounds like a green text. Oh my god. Just told my husband this story recently when we were driving around the town we grew up in and reminiscing about our teen years. There was a guy who I'd seen around town, usually across the street from a bus stop I used often, that I thought was super cute. I wound up meeting him a couple of years later at a mutual friend's backyard barbecue. And he was cool, and remembered me from that bus stop. Apparently he had been into me from afar as well. And we decided to move to the front of the house to speak privately and possibly make out. Well, he was super drunk, and we talked and sat next to each other on the front steps, and as the conversation dwindled and our faces moved closer to kiss, inches away from each other, he turns and vomits like a fire hose between his legs. I tried to comfort him a bit and then went back to the party and left shortly after. He felt terrible and asked me out later, and I said, "Frick it, let's not totally blow this guy off. Everyone gets super drunk sometimes, sure." But his idea of a date was taking me to a graveyard in broad daylight to get drunk, and I realized he was very, very dumb, and I never spoke to him again. I was 17, my boyfriend was 20 or 21. We were out to dinner at a fancy place with his parents. He loudly turned to me and said, "By the way, since you won't sleep with me, I'm banging other girls." with his parents inches away. That dinner became incredibly awkward after that. To clarify, I was a virgin and not ready yet.
Could I just say if that was my 21-year-old son, I'd spank him like a freaking toddler over the table.
If it was my son, I would have sent him home and enjoyed the fancy dinner with his ex-girlfriend. Well, enjoyed is a strong word, it would probably still be awkward. I once went on a date where I probably said like 5 words. Girl just talked for over an hour and a half without ever including me in the conversation. Just reminisced, complained, and bragged about her life for over 90 minutes straight. I was so taken aback that I just kind of drove home wondering if that experience was real or not.
Not a date, but this reminds me of one of my girlfriend's friends. She kept telling my girlfriend how she wanted to meet me and all that. Had a dinner. Not a single question was asked by her. It was all about her and her mother and her weird racist tangent about how she, a white woman, couldn't see Black Panther in her home state of North Carolina for fear of being jumped and mugged by the black people in attendance. I would actually hazard a guess that the woman in question may not have had many friends due to her, let's say, garrulousness and crappy opinions, and was looking forward to meeting the new boyfriend because it meant someone she would have a free pass to run her mouth with and have him not walk out because he didn't want to annoy his date. In my junior college days, had a girl invite me over for a study date. Her dad was home and we actually studied at the kitchen table. Dad seemed cool from the little conversation we had. Aside from a 7-Eleven run for snacks and cigs, her dad was 10 feet away from us the whole time. I thought the date went well, we talked more than we studied, made tentative plans to see a movie. Couple of days later, I texted her, "What's your weekend looking like so we can check out a flick, grab some dinner?" She replies back it's not going to work, she wants someone more forceful. I was like, what? Apparently her running to her bedroom a few times for things she forgot was her hint to me that I was supposed to follow and pounce, I guess. I was very new to the city and ended up setting up a date with a girl off Tinder. I spent a lot of time looking into cool bars and suggested a bunch to her, but she ended up really wanting to go to a certain bar, like wouldn't take no for an answer. I looked it up, it looked okay, nothing really that special. I figured she had some sort of thing with the people who worked there where she could escape if the date went bad. Fast forward to the date, it's going really well, she's absolutely gorgeous, and the conversation is really easy. I bring up the choice of bar and why she was so adamant on this one. She said her ex-boyfriend works there, and that threw me off, but I figured they broke up a while ago now and are just friends. So I questioned further, asking how long ago they broke up, and she tells me 2 weeks ago, and that he is currently our bartender. I look over at the bar, and this massive 280-pound guy is giving me the biggest death stare. I was wondering all night why he was being such a prick to me, and now I understood. I got out of there pretty quickly after that. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. A guy I saw for less than a month, if I recall correctly, took it upon himself to vent any problems relating to the relationship that we had to a male friend of mine he didn't really know well at all. In retrospect, he was a peculiar guy in many different ways, and this hampered his ability to make his own friends to whom he could vent and get advice from. At the time, however, it was incredibly strange for my friend, who explicitly told him several times, "Dude, Sheila's my friend, not you. I have no idea who you are. Please don't come to me with complaints about her." I think it took about 4 or 5 tries and my dumping of him for him to understand it. Some guy took my glasses, ran out of the restaurant with them, and I got a text like 15 minutes later of him taking a selfie in them at his place. He said if I wanted them back, I would have to come over to his place. Holy crap, what a butthole. Did you mention an alternative of, or the police could come and get them?
I honestly really should have done that. This was while I was in the Marines. I met up with this girl from POF, all seemed well from our chats and texting, so we decided to meet up for a date in Palm Springs. Nothing out there yet. I get there to find out she has kids, which she has brought along but never told me about having kids whatsoever, and without missing a beat, she asks me right there to have a contract marriage. I spit my drink out ASAP while she tried to explain how it would benefit the both of us. I just looked at her with a stern look, told her to get her crap together, told her to lose my number, and walked the frick out. Hey baby, want some TRICARE?
She is the textbook definition of a dependent.
She had previously told me how irresponsible her sister was. Her sister received a positive result for herpes. Sister thought it meant she was clean and didn't have it. I don't get the logic either.
A few weeks later, we had been seeing each other pretty casually and she mentions that her sister wanted to swap. Yeah, no thanks. On a third or fourth date, I went back to his apartment to have a glass of wine. We had a great evening until near the end he said, "Wow, I can't believe you passed almost every test." Turns out he set up his apartment with small girlfriend tests. He made sure there was little to no toilet paper to see if I would change the roll, if I rinsed my dishes, if I turned out the lights behind me, where I put my jacket and shoes, etc. Needless to say, there were no further dates. That was no man. That's his mother wearing his skin, testing you. This gave me a chill. Like, he just couldn't wait to reveal his master plan? That he'd put her through the gauntlet of girlfriend material tests? Yeah, major D-bag. Now, setting up one or two of those small tests in and of itself isn't inherently terrible and will make for a nice story a couple of weeks or months later, but in fact that, for him, the whole date seemed to revolve around those tests is a red flag. The secret final test is to have her fight his ex. Not major, online match, meet for dinner. She tells me she's lactose intolerant, proceeds to order food with lots of dairy products. The restaurant was small and in an old house, so the bathroom was the single closet style that happened to be less than 10 feet from our table. Her food upset her, so she uses that loudly and leaves the door open after she's done. Yep. Still asks if we can go get ice cream afterwards. Ugh, that girl likes to party. I'd been dating this guy for about a month. I knew he was pretty freshly out of another relationship. We were having beers on a patio at a tap house nearby, and his phone rings and he answers it and proceeds to talk to who I realized was his ex. They were arguing and talking about their breakup, all while he was sitting at the table with me. After about an hour and a few beers later, a guy at the table next to me gave me a kind of nod to join his table. I did. We talked about what an idiot the other guy was being. We spent the next couple of hours chatting, D-bag left when his phone call was over, and my new friend and I ended up dating for a year, and we're still friends to this day. I've been on and off the dating app life for a couple of years now. I just got my first big boy job and moved to a new area. I matched with this cute girl who was a junior in a college nearby. We had a nice first date, got coffee and walked around. We set up plans to grab lunch that weekend. During lunch, we decided to go on an impromptu hike. I drove us to my house to grab some water, snacks, change clothes, and we had a nice hike. Everything was going pretty darn well. We texted and kept up throughout the week. That Friday, I was at a friend's house. We had a few drinks, so I didn't feel comfortable driving back home. He didn't have an Android charger and my phone was dying, so I sent a courtesy text to let her know I was going to be out of commission for a while. The next morning, I get home and charge in my phone. After a few seconds, I get a slew of text messages, around 50, all from her. It was a spiral into insanity. At first, she told me to have fun and have a good night. Then it went to, "Hey, are you free?" to, "Why aren't you talking to me?" And near the latter, she mentioned she drove to my house and didn't see my car. She accused me of sleeping around. Basically, any and every insecurity got projected onto me within a couple of hours, all while I was asleep. I called it off immediately. She probably had some deeper issues, and I hope she's gotten help or is happy. It was just the transition from a few nice dates to that night that made me really take a step back and go, what the actual frick? People who do this, think your complicated feelings through, condense them into a concise message, or sleep on it and leave it at that. You're only going to drive folks away with your walls of text. Case in point, my ex was kinda like this. She was totally normal until she had a lot of personal issues happen all at once, and just kind of lost her crap after about 2 to 3 years of normal dating. I can't have my phone on me at work a lot. Sometimes I'd turn it on at the end of the day and it would start with, "Hi, how are you?" and progress into, "Are you actually at work?" and, "Oh my god, you'd better not be with someone else, you fricking hussy." And she'd eventually work herself back to calm and be like, "I'm just so crazy sometimes, that's why you love me." Hint: this does not make someone love you. She did this about once a week along with other crazy crap like spying on all my texts and Facebook messages and harassing my female friends. I finally broke up with her when she refused to get any therapy. The last fight we had was her screaming at me about how dare I get my master's degree before her, and I clearly did it on purpose to make her feel worse about her life. To clarify, I did struggle to keep our relationship intact for almost 2 more years of full-on crazy psycho behavior, but there's only so much crap you can take before it starts affecting your own mental health as well. And also, for the record, it did make me realize that all these women I knew who were in terrible relationships that I was, like, she should just leave them. Yeah, Now I realize it's not actually that easy when you love someone.
Oh my god, I used to be like this. It's like relationship PTSD. It happens when you've gotten gaslighted or cheated on, or have a few other things happen to you that leave you with trust issues. I did a lot of therapy that only marginally helped. It got better only after I was in a stable relationship for a little while, where my partner provided strong boundaries like, I understand where you're coming from, but here's what behavior I will accept and which ones I won't accept. Staying within that structure means now it's downgraded to minor freakouts and play wrestling when they won't tell me what they're laughing about on their phone. I said something the guy I was dating at the time didn't like, so to punish me, he punched himself 3 times in the jaw and knocked out a tooth. A year ago, I met up with a girl I met on a dating site. We went out for coffee and had a good talk about movies and video games. Then, everything got weird and she asked if she could read me some of her poetry about her ex-boyfriend cheating on her. She proceeded to sob in public in the middle of the poem and wouldn't stop until she was finished with her very long poem, despite being a blubbering, sniffling mess. There was no second date. Her next date heard her poems about her date with the guy who didn't like poetry. Her date after that was easier because she could just reuse the poems from the previous date. On 2 separate occasions, I've gone home with the guy after a perfectly lovely first date to find an array of adult bedroom toys laid out on the bed, ready for use. Don't get me wrong, I'm generally down, but you can't just spring that on someone, guys. There has to be a discussion before you bring out a leather hood and a Flogotron 3000. In both cases, there was no second date. He made me Uber to him, $20 one way to a nice building, so we could Uber together to a bar by my condo. Cost me $40 to go somewhere 2 blocks from my place. I don't get it. He then pulled a pint of Svedka out and chugged it in one shot at the bar. He ordered 2 drinks and shoved me the bill. He hit on the bartender in a language I don't speak. She was very uncomfortable. He then asked me where I lived. Told him the name of the building. He decided that he liked my building better than his and wanted to stay with me for a few days to check it out and buy a penthouse. I said no, but he could contact a realtor. He went bat crap crazy. I looked down and he's on Tinder while screaming at me. He showed me a girl and said he was going to frick her if I didn't let him in. I told him to go for it, I'm not interested. He followed me the whole walk to my place, stumbling, grabbing my arm and screaming at me. He tried to steal my purse. The police ended up coming up to me and holding him long enough for me to get home. He sent me a series of bizarre threatening messages that night and kept randomly messaging me that he loved me, I'm a B-word, I'm his only hope, he was going to have his way with me against my will. I posted about it on Facebook and some other friends had run-ins with him. Guess he's homeless and was getting by staying at people's houses and borrowing their stuff to look like he's somewhat wealthy to con more people. If I'd let him in, I'd have been screwed. It was a crap show of events for a first date. Here's the short version of an insanely crazy date. Took a girl out hiking. She bought a machete. She stripped down into the buff and started whacking through the foliage with her blade, and then got mad at me and threw roadkill at me. Have you ever witnessed a bride or groom say, I do not, at a wedding? While working in the wedding industry for over 17 years, we've hosted on average 140 weddings per year. 10 plus years ago, we had a wedding and the groom and his groomsmen arrived, taking pictures, joking around, guests all arrived, took their seats, and about 5 minutes before the wedding was supposed to start, the bride's limo pulled up to the chapel. The bride's father got out, walked inside the chapel, walked to the microphone and stated the wedding was called off. His daughter would not be getting married today. He directed myself and my staff to still feed and liquor up all the guests since he'd already paid for all 170 people and got back into the limo and left. I never heard what the reason was, but that was by far the most awkward event I ever managed. It was a joke, but he was too nervous and it didn't really work. Everyone that heard him called him a jackass that ruined his own wedding. I was humiliated for him. I was in attendance where the pastor says, repeat after me, for better or for worse, and the groom said, for better and for better. Everyone chuckled, but there was a hint of honesty there. They divorced after 9 months. I had a friend who decided to have a whole staged scene at this moment, with a mini soap opera playing out in the middle of the wedding. A mutual friend who was pregnant stood up and said that the baby was the groom's, and her husband flipped out. All the wedding party had scripted lines like, "Shut up, Susan, you know you lost your chance with him after the disappearance of your mysterious twin sister." The bride and groom were all in on it. It took the rest of the people only a few lines to realize that this was a joke. Fun was had by all, until about 3 months later when the soap opera actually happened and she cheated on him with his friend. Groom said, "I don't." Awkward silence, and then, it was a joke, followed by a longer, more awkward silence.
Pranked ya!
Yes, at my cousin's wedding. The bride suddenly backed out at the last second. The wedding was abruptly cancelled and we, the family of the groom, all went to a restaurant instead. The bride was kind of a B-word who was abusive towards my cousin and extorts him for his money, so we were all relieved that this happened. I guess bullet dodged, I suppose? Shame about the literal tens of thousands of dollars they'd probably spent up to that point, but what can you do? One of the times my father went to the altar after my mum had divorced him. He was what you'd call a serial groom. In any event, the wedding was being hosted at someone's house and they got in front of the minister and decided not to get married. But they were both drunks and there was a lot of booze stocked up and why let it all go to waste? So they decided to get crap show drunk and have a party. I don't remember her name as it would have been his 5th marriage at the time. He eventually hit marriage number 5, walked away from an engagement one more time and was engaged yet again when he died.
Not exactly that, but an acquaintance of mine was getting married. A few days before the wedding, they realized they weren't going to make it as a couple. However, because everything was paid for, they agreed to go through with it. Apparently, they fooled people quite well, as a friend who was invited told me that they looked so in love, but I knew it was just an act. A few months later, they quietly went their separate ways.
So I'm guessing they never signed anything to make the marriage official, they just had a party.
That's a safe bet. Getting married takes paperwork, so if you just don't submit it, you're off the hook.
My cousin did this, actually unbeknownst to his then-wife. They moved to a different state right after the ceremony and were going to file the paperwork there, and things immediately got kind of rocky. My cousin decided to just not submit the paperwork and didn't tell his wife. He kept trying to make it work. I think he did love her, but knew that she wasn't all in. When the wife finally decided to ask for a divorce about 6 months later, he was like,
"Guess what? We don't have to pay."
Before anyone goes, "Oh my god, what a prick," yes, my cousin is notoriously a D-bag, but he wasn't trying to screw her over or anything either. She had a lot of mental health problems, and in hindsight, their lives needed to go in different directions. My cousin paid for her to resettle back home and finish her college degree while he did his own thing.
My buddy was so nervous he blurted out, "I do," the first time the priest addressed him.
Same thing happened at my cousin's wedding. It got a pretty good laugh from everybody, bride and groom got embarrassed and red-faced, and the bride continued to giggle from nervousness throughout the entire thing up until the actual I do's and kiss. Just adorable all round. Saw a guy who was too drunk to even say I do. Amazingly, they went through with it. Split up 6 months later. Turns out he'd cheated on the bride the night before. Stay classy. There's no better way to celebrate the most important day of your relationship than by getting so drunk you don't remember any of it. I was at a wedding where the bride didn't turn up. Was horribly awkward whilst the groom just refused to agree that she wasn't coming. We all sat there for over an hour waiting. We were taken through for drinks, and the groom and main members of the wedding party disappeared. Apologies were made by the staff, dinner was served for anyone who'd stuck around, and then we all went home. Bride had freaked out. Apparently she did still want to get married, but the groom refused to go through it all again. They're still together though. Yeah, the pastor got the bride's name wrong. The groom was like, "I do not." All was well though, everyone got a pretty good laugh out of it. Highlight of the entire ceremony. I know a wedding manager and he only witnessed it once, but the groom meant it as a joke. He had some sort of bet going. The bride got mad and ran out of church. I just picture this annoying 90s groom, "I do not," then grinning and looking around for approval. It's pretty much Ace Ventura doing this in my mind. "Dude, it was a joke, come back!" Here in the Netherlands, if you say no, or maybe, or anything else that's not clearly an affirmation, even if it's clearly meant as a joke, the wedding is off, and the person leading the ceremony is legally obligated to leave the premise to make sure the wedding cannot be legally completed. This is to prevent forced marriages. All the bride or the groom has to do to make sure they're not getting married is to say no briefly. Nobody can force the marriage to continue after that. So in the Netherlands, the guy would have ruined the entire day and thus deserved all of the crap the bride could give him. I was at a wedding officiated by an ancient Catholic priest. He muddled his way through the ceremony but seemed to fall into the regular Sunday Mass rhythm, forgetting that this was a wedding. Eventually he started to say the Our Father in one of the last parts of the ceremony. The congregation, following along on our ceremony booklets, realizes something is wrong and start to rustle uncomfortably. Eventually, the best man went up to the priest and whispered in his ear. The priest was startled and muttered, "Oh, I forgot about that part." He then went on to ask the bride and groom if they actually wanted to get married. They both said, "I do." Next, he forgot the "you may kiss the bride" line, so we all waited uncomfortably again until my friend shouted, "Kiss!" They kissed, we clapped, and they all lived happily ever after. In conclusion, old priest forgets to ask bride and groom if they wanted to get married. They did. Not exactly. The couple was so emotional that they just couldn't answer. They're the sweetest of people who were burned so badly in previous marriages that when things finally went right for them, they both broke down a little. The priest made a little joke about love, let them calm down, and started that part of the ceremony all over again. I know it's not exactly I do not, but when my parents got married and the priest said, "You may now kiss the bride," my dad said, "Do I have to?" At my wedding, when the pastor was done talking, he was like, Steve, you can go ahead. Give her a kiss." It sounded freaking stupid, and I felt robbed that I didn't get the usual, "You may kiss the bride" line. One of my friends is so uncomfortable with public affection that she and her husband high-fived instead of kissing. My aunt was with an abusive butthole and decided not to go through on the day of, and didn't show up. My grandfather went up and stood on the stage and said something along the lines of, "There won't be a wedding tonight, but stay for dinner and drinks on me." Maybe that contributed to a 100% more jovial atmosphere at the reception, if the woman was that unpleasant to be around. Hope the groom was okay, though. Not my story, but I heard about a friend of my ex-girlfriend getting married about 3 days before the wedding. The girl her fiancé was cheating on her with showed up at her door. She was crying hysterically and said, "I can't let you marry him. He's been cheating on you for 2 years. Please don't marry him." But it got colder from there. The girl went through with everything until it was time for the vows, and when it was her turn to say "I do," she clasped her hands and said, "I do not." Everyone kind of uncomfortably chuckled, going, "I wonder if they rehearsed this." When she goes, "I do not marry the man who has lied to my face for 2 years. I do not marry the man who crept out of my bedroom when I was asleep to the neighbor's apartment to crawl into bed with her. I do not marry the man who stands here with me, humiliating me, my friends, and my family on what was supposed to be my special day. I do not, in the eyes of the church, forgive this man nor take him to be mine." It seemed like the story was going to come to a head, but apparently she just walked away crying and none of the guests knew what to make of it all. Apparently there was tremendous confusion. As a wedding DJ, something like this is a personal nightmare of mine. I frequently play music for the ceremony and processional, and I would have no idea what to play after a scene like this. Maybe just some light jazz while everyone gathers their wits. Yes, my own sister did this at her wedding. She was marrying this guy basically just for his money, and she apparently found out his business was failing, and he was no longer a millionaire a few weeks before the ceremony. She wanted to embarrass him, so she did not call it off right away and dropped the bomb at the last second. Sounds like she's an awful human being. She is. Tell her I hate her. Thanks. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Not even close to the same, but at my wedding I spaced out while the officiant was talking. When it got time for "I do," I was just staring blankly out the window. My now wife got my attention, and I had to ask what was going on. I said, "I do. We didn't practice that part, sorry." This is adorable. My best friend got married recently, and the groom was staring out the window while the officiant was talking, and suddenly made a really shocked and scared face, and started to look panicked, and clearly wasn't listening. I was really concerned, but the rest of the ceremony went fine, and it turns out he realized in that moment he had forgotten a piece of the paper he needed during the ceremony. From this, we can discover grooms, and men in relationships generally, could benefit from discreetly well-placed teleprompters. Now there is a business model. I've been at a wedding where the bride basically said, "No, I don't submit to my husband." They had to ask the officiant not to use any of that language when exchanging vows. He obviously didn't listen, and she just crossed her arms and said, "No, I do not," when that part of the vows came about. They still got married, and as far as I know, they live happily together. That whole wedding weekend was a circus from beginning to end. I knew a guy here in Pittsburgh whose bride just didn't show up. He decided to go around and invite some local homeless folks to feed them with the catering he had paid for. He's a fairly wealthy dude, so I'm sure the food was no fire hall special either. Crappy thing, but a hell of a guy. Never, but my sister did mess up her lines. She got so nervous it took 10 minutes. The do comes after I. The confusion is understandable. Pretty close. My ex-father-in-law, a retired judge, was officiant at a friend's wedding. They wrote their own vows and didn't run them by him beforehand, but I can't remember exactly how they went. It was something like, "With me, you will never be alone. Together, you need not fear sickness or loss. I won't ever leave your side." When they were done, he said, "I'm sorry, I can't accept those vows. Legally speaking, I need a clear and affirmative statement of consent from both of you. And you phrased everything as a negative. Do you want to be married? Please answer in a clear, articulated statement of affirmative consent." They both said, "I do," and had a little laugh, and that was that. They were married. Not me, but an old high school friend who was cheating before her wedding was getting married and lightning hit the steeple right after they said their vows. Falling rock damaged some cars parked on the street next to the church. They lasted about a year. I kept a piece of the steeple for a long time and then tossed it a few years later when I realized it was probably bad luck. I want to believe the piece of steeple had a purpose. It washed up on a beach somewhere where another troubled couple were honeymooning, became a murder weapon, went on its way to many great home-wrecking adventures, but only the doomed ones. I would binge-watch that series. Yes, but it was purely a mistake. But before the bride could process what she had said, the man passed out and hit his head on a church pew, splitting it wide open. The wedding was stopped and his head was sewn up after it was revealed that the bride indeed made a mistake. Needless to say, the groom was on pain meds and hitting the alcohol did not help. It was all a big laugh afterwards, same couple still married. 15 to 20 years now. When I was getting married, the officiant, clerk at the courthouse, an older gentleman who had been in the business long enough to marry my parents, asked me if I would take my wife to be my wife. After I said I do, he then turned to her and asked, "And do you take John to be your wife?" To which she smiled, not skipping a beat, and said, "I take him to be my husband, yes." There was a pause where the clerk looked at her funny and then he covered his face. "I said wife, didn't I?" There was a nice round of laughter for us and our immediate family and friends, followed by his sincerest apologies. I'm constantly reminded I'm the most handsome wife in the world. This isn't an I do not situation, but at my wedding, my officiant, embarrassingly, confused me by asking questions like, "Will you take care of your wife forever? Will you hold her dear? Will you support her?" Typical wedding questions? So I looked at my wife and said, "I will." I immediately realized my mistake and stammered out, "I do." I felt like an idiot, but hey, my wife gave me her right hand instead of her left for the wedding ring, so it all balanced out. I don't know if this was horrifically awkward from an audience perspective or a wedding full of cute rom-com-esque mistakes. I think it could have seemed either way. I seriously felt like saying it, but I didn't have the cojones. Fights started in the honeymoon and marriage lasted 1.3 years. If you feel like saying it on your wedding day, do it. It's so much easier than navigating a divorce. No, but almost. I made a Princess Bride reference when we were sitting down with our officiant for the first time. We chuckled and he never mentioned it again. Until the wedding day, he did the whole bit, "Marriage is what brings us together today," and so on. The whole speech. My family was cracking up, but neither she nor her family have ever seen the movie. Honestly, I thought I was going to go to bed drunk and single that night. My now husband started fidgeting during the sermonettes leading up to the exchanging of the vows. The minister asked if we were ready to exchange them, and he said, "Not yet." They didn't capture my reaction, nor did they get my daughters holding back my, in full dress blues, marine son. He leaned towards the minister and said he forgot the rings in the car. His son, who was taping the wedding, ran out and got them. My father-in-law yelled out, "He didn't get that from me." Afterwards, the minister and the wedding planner said that it had never happened before. Neither one asked my husband beforehand because he seemed so calm. Not at the wedding, but at the rehearsal dinner the night before. Bride and groom's mother got into a fight out in the front of the restaurant. The groom said, "I'm not marrying you until you apologize to my family and promise you'll fix this." The bride refused, groom called off the marriage. Bride decided to still have the reception and slept with the groom's roommate. Come to find out later she was only marrying him for his parents' money. Safe to say the groom dodged a bullet. This comes from a fellow I know who photographed weddings. The groom, at the reception after the wedding ceremony, giving his groom's speech to a packed reception hall, thanks the best man for sleeping with his wife the night before and walks out. I was in a wedding party that got super close to derailing. We coordinated a meetup before the ceremony for wedding pictures near some train tracks in an unfamiliar city. The groom didn't do the best job of communicating to the bride the actual location, causing the bride's side to be late. This sent the bride into a fit of rage, saying such colourful phrases as, "You always do this, I hate you," to, "I'm calling off the fricking wedding." This made for an incredibly awkward first look, mind you. While the bride was screaming bloody murder, the groom was off in the distance with his head down and back turned to us. Within moments, I got a text from him stating that he'd just adjusted his fantasy football lineup and was good to go. Pictures commenced and the wedding went off with a few more major hitches, including the bride crying and almost backing out moments before the walk. They expect their first child soon. I did see a couple signing marriage papers at the municipal building in my county, and then he decided after she signed that he wasn't really interested in being married. They talked it out, he got water dumped on him, and we all got a show. No, but I've seen someone object when the priest asked, did anyone have a reason as to why the marriage shouldn't go forth? And it was my drunk, troublemaking cousin who professed her love for the groom. She got thrown out. I hope you were related to the bride. Not at the ceremony, but after the rehearsal dinner the night before, the bride saw the groom dancing with all her bridesmaids at the bar. Seemed like normal, fun, drunk stuff, but she flipped out and made a giant scene. Ended up sitting in the back seat of my car, my wife was in the wedding, bawling and refusing to talk to the groom. After like 30 seconds of people trying to talk sense into her, she told us to take her to her parents' house. We get there, take her inside, and leave. The next morning we find out the wedding is off. Apparently, the groom came over and she yelled at him, said she didn't love him, didn't want to go through with the wedding. The groom finally said, okay, fine. Then she turned it into, he called off the wedding, and became the victim. She ended up keeping the gigantic ring, going on the expensive honeymoon with a friend, while her parents had to eat the cost of the ceremony and reception because it was too late to cancel. Rumors were it was around $50,000. That afternoon, they brought around pieces of the wedding cake to everyone so it wouldn't go to waste. Our read on it was the bride never wanted to go through with it and this was her way out. I knew none of these people, so for me it was like watching a Jerry Springer episode. Me and another guy who no one knew just sat back and watched it all unfold, going, this is awesome. The worst/best I've seen in person was a bride saying, I need a minute, leaving and then coming back a minute later to say I do. I was thoroughly confused, but it turns out she had been engaged before, and that man had died in a violent accident, and some memories came flooding back. My husband said, do I have to, when he was asked to say his vows. The judge said, do it or you aren't getting married today. He did it. My husband thinks he's funny. He's not. During the rehearsal dinner, I said, yabba dabba doo. I was at a destination wedding where the bride called it off the night before. It was an awkward vacation for the two families for the rest of the week. One of the resort guests, not related to the wedding, wrote about it in their TripAdvisor review. I used to be a bartender and once had a rehearsal dinner where the groom found out that his younger brother, also a groomsman, had lost his virginity to the bride-to-be. The details of when the act had happened never made it to me, and despite my best detective work, I was never able to figure out whether or not the wedding actually went through. In my 16 years as a wedding photographer, I never had a I don't moment, but I did see many grooms and brides show up extremely late and very drunk. I had a lesbian couple break up on their honeymoon because one of them fooled around with the masseuse, and I had two couples break up the day before the wedding for cheating, and one bride that stumbled down the aisle after taking 3 Xanax with champagne. There are so many more. Oh, the stories I could tell.
To the doctors of Reddit, what is it like when you have a doctor's appointment? I avoid disclosing I'm a doctor unless specifically asked what I do for work. I think I'm better taken care of when the doc/team is most comfortable and working in their routine. Difficult and demanding patients who request special treatment often have worse outcomes. I don't want to be one of them. I completely agree. I never tell them I'm a doctor. Same thing when I take my kids to a pediatrician. I just want to be treated like a regular patient. Only exception was when I broke my hand and needed it operated on ASAP, not 10 days later. Being an ER resident, I always wonder which one of my co-residents is working in the emergency department as I drive home from a shift, knowing if something were to happen, they would be checking my rectal tone in front of all my coworkers. And then I think about how big their hands are. With my mom, it was like this. Mom, I think I have basal cell carcinoma on my back, but I can't see it quite clearly. Derm, you do have basal cell carcinoma. Good job. Went to student health as a med student. Attending I worked with the week before does my PAP. With the resident, he asked, I said yes. Kept quizzing me. What am I looking for? What does it mean if the PAP is positive? Etc. I'm getting questions right, but he's being real weird about it. Realize in parking lot after appointment, he was asking the resident, not me. Rotate with said resident a few months later. Bad, because I can see all the shortcuts they're taking and I'm aware of the examination they should be doing but aren't. Edit, I should clarify, because I'm afraid it might have given the wrong impression. Most physicians I've met seem to know what they're about, but it's easy to spot areas where you would have done something differently, and the negative examples always stick out more than the positive. The example I was thinking of was this. I didn't learn I had scoliosis until my first week of medical school. It's mild, as scoliosis goes, but I have back and/or neck pain every day. So, I went to a local MD to get checked out and see if I should be worried. I wait for 2 hours to get in. Said MD takes a cursory history, doesn't ask any of the right questions, family history of this condition, when did it start, has it worsened, etc., and in the physical exam, barely touches my back. I knew the tests they needed to do and the questions she should have asked because I was in medical school. I was there for her experience and advice. I got neither. A better doctor, or more realistically, one with more time to see patients, would have said, hey, I don't know anything about scoliosis. You need to see someone who does. Or hey, actually knowing how to deal with a reasonably common condition would have been nice, I suppose, but I don't know, I'm a lowly resident. Edit 2. Whoa, never had this many notifications before. To answer a few questions, number 1, this does not qualify as professional medical advice. If you have a medical problem, you should go see your doctor in the meat space. If you do have scoliosis, I would look around for a doctor who A, is an MD/DO with an orthopedics background, whether as an actual orthopod or sports med, or B, is a practicing DO, you'll have to Google it, who does OMT and is familiar with scoliosis. Just my 2 cents. Opinions on chiropractors vary wildly in the medical community, and I won't get into that here because frankly, I'm not informed enough to comment. Number 2. Several people have asked how this uppity med student knew anything in his first week of med school. Fair question. I was told I had scoliosis in the first week of med school. It was 6 months to a year before I got it checked out. Never had time to do anything those first 2 years, especially not go to the doctor. Number 3. As others have pointed out, never be afraid to seek a second opinion. Doctors are human, and even hyper-educated humans make mistakes. Not only that, but frequently, diseases don't present the same way in the same patient every day of the year. Things can be messy in the real world. Complicated diagnoses may take time and may have to work through alternative diagnoses to get to the truth. Male gynecologist here. When I have a patient come in for a PAP, it is always a bit annoying when they leave their underwear on under the gown. I have to step out of the room and wait for them to remove it. When I went in for my first physical in years, I stripped naked under the paper gown. Apparently, guys don't do this. They leave their underwear on. Who knew? My family doc, who is also my best friend, had a good laugh at my expense over this breach in etiquette. He also texted me the night before to let me know he was putting the KY in the fridge for my exam. Not a doctor, but was a medical assistant in an OBGYN practice for a while. We were near a very large medical center, so would regularly get physician patients. My favorite was this physician couple who would come in for pregnancy check-ins and refuse to let me take the woman's blood pressure. The husband would bring his own stethoscope and BP cuff, and they would sit down into this weird, intimate BP-taking ritual that took forever while I just kind of stood off to the side. I told the doc I was working with about it, and she's like, "It's okay. I know them. They're like that. I'll take it again when I see her." So weird. It truly depends on the way you act. Most of the time, I won't tell the doctor that I'm also a doctor unless specifically asked about it or if there is a slip of my tongue about symptoms or any other medical words. Some doctors tend to be not too specific when they know you're a doctor because, quote, you already know what's happening. Sometimes, even my wife gets the ask your husband to clarify your questions. I try to have an open mind when I'm the patient because we are trained to think the worst, so there is a lot of cancer in my mind. Currently, I work in a palliative care unit. I have had medical patients and carers, and I would say that it is truly diverse how they react. We are also human and we are sick and vulnerable. The doctor vein can go completely off or go on overdrive. Turning it off is better and less intrusive most of the time. The test results came in. It's bad news. You're not subscribed to Am I the Genius or Am I the Jerk, linked in the description below. And you haven't liked the video either. But it's not too late to turn your life around. Please, subscribe. It's for the better. Just kidding. Thanks for watching. Not a doctor, but whenever my dad, who is a doctor, took me in for an appointment when I was a kid, it was always super awkward because if anything was done even remotely incorrectly, he'd basically do the medical equivalent of the "let me speak to your manager" routine. Which I kind of understand in that context, since it's your kid's health you're talking about and not a freaking expired coupon, but still, made me want to melt through the floor. In my experience, doctors tend to be pretty decent patients when admitted to the hospital. They know the routine, they get to know the nurses, they try not to hassle anyone, they can speak to their own doctors as colleagues, etc. Nurses, on the other hand, feel it is very important for you to know at all times and in every sentence that they are nurses, and they are much better at nursing than you. I will say there was this one instance of a doctor/patient and a hospitalist getting into an argument that was pretty interesting. Basically, doctor/patient disagreed with what the hospitalist was doing and asked if hospitalist had read any of the recent studies which suggested that he, instead, follow a different protocol. Hospitalist was not down with the quote, "let's talk as colleagues," and decided to go full on, "screw you, I'm the only one wearing pants in the room right now." There was a mild argument, but remained incredibly civil. 2 days later, the hospitalist was fired. Doctor/patient's brother, or some other close relation, was the CEO. Nurses tend to thrash. Doctors go for surgically precise cuts. One time, I got a page about a patient who was still having some pain that wasn't relieved with the Tylenol she had specifically requested earlier. So, I ordered Toradol/Ketorolac. For those unfamiliar, Toradol is an NSAID, i.e., the same drug class as Advil/ibuprofen and Aleve/naproxen. The only difference is that it is not available over the counter and it can be administered both orally and parenterally, IV/injection. I get another page like 15 minutes later from the charge nurse about how this patient refused the Toradol because she is a nurse and does not want to be given any, quote, narcotic pain medication. I explained the situation to the charge nurse over the phone and got the feeling that the patient was under the impression that she was being given tramadol, which technically is an opioid, but not one of the good ones by any stretch. A discussion ensued, and despite very clearly explaining what I just wrote about Toradol in both lay and medical language, this nurse just insisted that she was right and vaguely insinuated I was trying to turn her into an addict. Her argument basically devolved into her shouting, "I've been a nurse longer than you've been a doctor, and I know what I'm talking about." I tend to give an honest effort to educate patients, but at some point, you just have to pick your battles. So, she got some naproxen, and I made it clear to the nursing staff that unless things significantly changed, either with her condition or her attitude, I did not want to get any more calls if she was still complaining of pain when the naproxen didn't work as well as she wanted it to. I'm a nurse, and I don't like announcing it when I am being treated medically. My OB knows what I do because I work with her. Sometimes they figure me out if I let some jargon slip. I don't bring it up because I'm an OB nurse, and generally, I have little knowledge about other specialties. I don't want them to leave information out because they assume I know. I also don't want them to feel like I am judging them and the care they give me, and have them act weird around me as a result. I have a doctorate. I visit the medical doctor very infrequently, but after a little initial confusion, my GP once remarked, "Oh, you're a real doctor." Med student. Had to go to the ED and then surgery for appendicitis. Got pimped by the surgeon. Felt bad, man. Edit. Getting pimped as a medical student is when you get grilled by your attending about facts about medicine that often are minutia they only know. Sometimes facts not even relevant to medicine. Even more often, the questions are, quote, read my mind type of questions. Your embarrassment and fear is what causes you to remember these facts, so they're used as a, quote, teaching tool. As a nurse, I could tell precisely which topics individual baby surgeons were traumatized by based on which BS orders and details they obsess over, and I curse whatever attending did that to them every time it becomes my problem. Speaking from both perspectives as a younger primary care physician. As a patient, my appointments are 50% what I'm there for and usually very direct, e.g., I have a sinus infection. It is now thick yellow-green discharge with fevers and present over 10 days. I think I may now need antibiotics. He will take a quick peek, then just give me a script. Then 50% non-related conversation regarding how my practice is going, learning a thing or two about a new specialist practice or tips and tricks of the trade. My doc is a very chill, well-versed, and quite an experienced physician who always teaches me a thing or two. As a physician, I also have multiple physicians as patients. My experience varies by specialty. Family physicians' patients seem more chill and relaxed, and usually drop by with a cup of coffee. Pediatricians who are patients are really fun to be around, but some of them seem to have underlying anxiety and at times fairly demanding. Internists are just so intimidating as patients, especially when older and more experienced, but always teach me a thing or two and force me to stay up to date on my guidelines. I also find specialist medical knowledge are more versed in their specialty. An ophthalmologist, as expected, won't know much about gynecology and PAPs, as their last PAP they did was in med school. Not a doctor, but as the husband of a nurse, it's horrid. My wife and the doctor/nurse practitioner will sit and bat ideas back and forth until they can get my wife to accept the diagnosis as her own idea. I'm a doctor. We make terrible patients because we tend to minimize or rationalize every warning sign. Going for a doctor's appointment basically reminds us that we can also get sick, and since we have the burden of knowledge, we're just hoping we don't find something that'll force a lifestyle change. Otherwise, most times it's been a pretty standard experience in terms of registering, waiting, and being seen for 15 minutes. If you go to someone you know personally, which I actually recommend against, you might get some preferential treatment, but it's mostly the same. Other way around, I'm a nurse and was taking care of a doctor I work with. Awkward. She asked me if she could give a urine sample, and she wasn't in for something I'd usually get one for, but then she made me nervous because she should know that. So I was like, "You're the doctor, you tell me." And she said, "Nope, you're the one calling the shots now." And I was like, "Okay, well, I think we are good with that one then." It was pretty awkward all around, but I work labor and delivery, so we deliver a lot of our own nurses and doctors, which is strange, but also nice. Today I learned that doctors go see other doctors. I thought they healed themselves naturally, like glowy mist thingies oozing out of their bodies and raising up into the air. But I have heard of barbers going to other barbers. My PCP doesn't know I'm a physician. When he asked, I lied about my profession. Not a doctor, but trained first aider for 20 plus years now. Step 1. The precursor. I'd been going blind for months. Not just a little, but my vision, which was corrected to 20/20 normally, was now utter crap even with my glasses on, to the point where I couldn't read text on a monitor. Docs can't figure out what's going on, so I worry for weeks, test after test. Step 2. The night. This was the night I figured out what was wrong with me. I was suddenly nothing but thirsty and peeing. Like, get up every hour and stagger to the back room to empty a full bladder and then chug a quart of water thirsty and peeing. And when I get up in the morning, I realize I need medical attention because I was apparently a diabetic. I then chugged a 2-liter of Dr. Pepper because hyperglycemia is a lot less lethal in the short term than hypoglycemia. Didn't know if I'd already pushed past the butt end of hyperglycemia, but my first aid training was in the right place. Step 3. The exam. Go into the triage. Nurse takes my BP and vitals. Observes that I'm obviously not 100% there mentally. Docs get an IV in me, and as it flushes, they draw blood as well. I share that I think I'm diabetic, and the AP and nurse both smile, ignore it, and spend 4 hours asking me about what drugs I'm on. Step 4. Smug face. I was diabetic. No apology from the doc, but my face was suitably smug every time he talked to me. Pretty great, really. Front of the line type stuff. Call my PCP friends or partner and say, "Hey, what are you doing for lunch? I've got a thing on me I want your opinion on. I'll buy you lunch." Or a radiologist. "Hey man, my shoulder's been killing me. I lifted too much with it and now it's borked. Mind doing an MRI? Sure. What's lunch look like for you?" Basically, I end up buying people lunches and they don't have to document anything. Win-win. I try not to flaunt my title, but it does have its advantages. Several years ago, I needed shoulder surgery. The morning of the surgery, the anesthesiologist and his nursing student came in. He asked if anyone had consented me for my nerve block. I said no, and his nurse started doing the prep work, draping my shoulder, cleaning, etc. The anesthesiologist starts to explain to me. What we are doing is called a stellate nerve block. Saying it very slowly, it's where we take a probe and we try to find the nerve that goes down your shoulder. Again, all being said very slowly so I can understand. And then we do, I'm sorry, I'm one of the radiology fellows here in the hospital. His whole demeanor relaxed, and he said at a normal pace, "We're doing a stellate nerve block." He gently pulled the nursing student out of the way and finished the rest of the procedure himself. When I go to see a doctor, which is not often enough since I don't need no stinking doctor, it's nice to be able to cut to the chase and not have the minutia explained. However, I make it clear that I'm no longer on my playground and it's their expertise that I'm paying for. I mostly sit there and try and convey what is wrong/what I need without telling the doctor. It's also hard not to just give them your history like you'd take a history and preempt their questions. Lay people don't announce, "Nothing runs in my family," without being asked. I always feel it's a bit twatty to say, "I'm a medical student/doctor" at the start, but then it's awkward when they work it out and you haven't told them before. I also feel under pressure to understand or remember exactly what they're talking about and prove my knowledge too. My dad is a pharmacist, and the number of times I'd come out of an appointment with a certain prescription and he would call the doctor to tell them to change it is countless. Most of the time he was colleagues or had a 1 degree of separation kind of relationship with these doctors, so they didn't seem to mind, even though it was awkward for me personally. Typically, he knew of a better option or just one of the generic, which would save him a bunch of money. I had one eye doctor who was mad though, so that was not fun. I am super polite, show up early, and yield to expertise that isn't specific to my specialty, radiology. I imagine that in some ways it's easier for my docs because they don't have to dumb anything down for me. I'm a nurse, and the worst thing for me is blood draws and IVs. At work, I'm the one they look for when there's a tough stick no one else can hit. I can tell in the first 30 seconds if the person knows what they're doing, but unless they're really hurting me, I try not to micromanage. Also, I have high blood pressure that runs 130/80 on a good day. If you let the air out of the cuff in 5 seconds and say it's 110/60, I don't trust you anymore. Not a doctor, but a medical lab scientist. My doctor knows what I do and sometimes jokes, "You could run this yourself, right?" Went to the ED and the RN asked if I was an MLS because she set the tubes she drew from my arm down without mixing them, and I immediately began to mix them. It's important to mix them because certain ones are rejected if a clot forms. She was like, "Great," without sarcasm. Another ED visit, the nurse learned what I did and insulted my career. "You just push buttons all day?" No. The instrument can't tell between a blast and a mono. I do. I go to an office outside of my job because I don't want my employer to have access to my medical record. Not that I have anything significant in my medical history to hide, and not that my employer can legally access my file without my consent, but I still like it this way. I started seeing a nurse practitioner out of necessity of getting an appointment, and now I choose to see her. She's thorough, she listens, and we get along really well. She actually gave me her personal email in case I needed to get a hold of her for any reason. That's not something you do for patients, but she knows I get it, and I would never abuse that privilege. 4th-year medical student. I tore my bicep, and before surgery, the anesthesiologist used an ultrasound to place a nerve block in my brachial plexus. This happens to be one of the biggest pain-in-the-butt bundles of nerves in the human body. It crisscrosses every which way and sends off branches which sometimes reconnect. I'm hopped up on benzos with a huge needle in my neck, and this dude is like, "What are the nerve roots of this little guy?" pointing to some blurry line on the screen. Screw that guy.
What's the worst case of helicopter parents that you've ever seen? I had a friend in middle or high school who was a Chinese girl adopted by an old white couple who were super weird and overprotective. Some of the things I remember about her parents: Mum volunteered at whatever school we were at and would sit with us at lunch to make sure her daughter was eating. They drove a minivan and made her sit in a car seat in the very back row until like freshman year of high school. Anytime someone praised them for raising such a good daughter, they would laugh and say, "She's not our daughter, she's adopted." They wouldn't let her ride the school bus, join any clubs, or hang out with anyone after school. When she got her driver's license, the dad brought light sticks, like air traffic controller sticks. Anytime she left the house, he would stand in the street with his light sticks and blocked traffic so that people wouldn't hit her as she backed out of the driveway. It was hilarious to watch, but she was completely mortified. This one broke my heart. My little brother is adopted, and I've lost my crap at people who've tried to say he's not my brother. I can't imagine ever feeling or thinking that way myself. That poor girl. People like that have no place adopting. The light sticks bit is hilarious, though.
I had a friend growing up whose mother was very protective. The father, not so much, but she was so bad that my parents called her Mama Hawk. I invited him to my 10th birthday party, which was at a laser tag place. His mum came, which was fine, but then while we were playing laser tag, she stood with him the whole time. Didn't play, just stayed by him. Really? What was she protecting him from? He turned out surprisingly normal and now lives 1,000+ miles away from her. I'm not sure how she deals with that. She probably thanks her lucky stars every night that he grew up a fine, well-adjusted young man living on his own, all because she boldly protected him from those deadly, deadly lasers. My friend wasn't allowed to use scissors until he was in high school. His parents were insane. You should have seen their reaction when he joined the army.
The army? Are you fricking insane? Do you want to live in constant fear? Do you want to have some psycho drill sergeant hovering over you and controlling your every fricking move?
No, Mom, that's why I'm leaving home and joining the army. I can imagine that there aren't many harsher forms of rebellion for a child of helicopter parents than leaving to an organization where you're both placed in harm's way and often completely cut off from contact. Hopefully that kid established some boundaries afterwards. Had a roommate freshman year whose mother called every day and stayed the first whole week of school. Alright. She would also randomly fly up to stay a week or two in the same bed with her daughter, accompanying her to all classes, meals, and social gatherings. The mum was afraid her daughter would not be pre-med anymore and would do anything to make sure she didn't change majors. I think what made this an extreme story was the fact that her mum flew in multiple times in 1 year and called every day all the way from India to the US. I work at a university. We had a parent get worried because he had not contacted her in a while and wasn't taking her calls. We tracked him down and it turned out he was just ignoring her because she called multiple times a day and was driving him crazy. I was a resident assistant in college and received a call at 3 in the morning to do a wellness check on a resident. We lived in the townhouses and it was winter, so I had to bundle up and started trudging through the snow. I'm 3/4 of the way there when I get another call canceling the wellness check. The kid's mom was worried that he wasn't answering her calls. Turns out he was asleep at 3 in the morning. I was a charge nurse in a substance and alcohol rehab, and this 19-year-old kid was admitted for smack detox and treatment. His mum wanted to be there for the entire admission process, which isn't out of the ordinary for families. However, after the kid was admitted and shown to his room, his mum wouldn't leave. Detox patients would get assessments every 2 to 4 hours and were asked a series of questions to determine if they would need medication for withdrawal. His mother answered all his questions for him, and at the end of the assessment was like, he'll take 10 milligrams of Valium for his anxiety, all while this kid lay in bed watching TV. In this particular rehab, visitors, cell phones, and laptops were allowed, so we couldn't tell her to leave until visiting hours were over. That time arrives and you guessed it, she's still there. As the charge nurse, I had the honor of asking her to leave. Mum looked at me legitimately confused and replied, "I have to leave? I was going to stay here with my son. There are 2 beds in his room, so I didn't think it was a problem." I then explained to his mum that the second bed needed to be kept open for another potential admission. Then I was yelled at for not providing her son with a private room and that this guy in the admissions department said she could stay throughout her son's detox and treatment. I told her patients weren't allowed to have overnight guests. She was appalled because she thought that because she was the mother that she fit into some kind of loophole or something. After she left, she visited every day and stayed from the beginning of visiting hours to the end. When she wasn't there, her son was on the phone with her. Needless to say, this kid relapsed immediately after he finished treatment. In conclusion, Enabler Mother actually wanted to stay in her adult son's room while he was in rehab. Jesus, that poor kid.
If that was my mum, I'd use substances too. This makes me feel sad. She probably just wanted her son to get better. I mean, she was going about it in an insane way, but I don't even know what I would do if my son was in that situation.
Newly enrolled freshman in college, and the poor kid's mum would come to the school and walk with him through the cafeteria line, picking out what she thought he should be eating. She did this for all 3 meals. Poor guy was so embarrassed. Freshman move-in day 1, I hung out, ate, roamed around, went to a soccer game, and went home. 3 days later, my daughter calls me. "Oh my God, Mom, there are still parents here." She was horrified. I was too. My mum once got a job application for me, filled it out, signed it, submitted it, got it back, emailed them confirming that I'd take it, then she told me she'd picked up the application for me. So that.
She's done far more embarrassing and helicoptery things, but I don't want anyone recognizing me, so that's all for now. I actually forgot about a worse case than this while writing. A girl that was a year below me in high school ended up going to the same community college as me. Her mum sits outside of all her classes listening in. She also makes her daughter dress the same as her and wear the same hairstyle. Her daughter is legitimately brainwashed. She doesn't have any friends because everyone is too creeped out by the situation, and her mother probably wouldn't allow it anyways. I wish I could help her somehow, but there isn't really a CPS for young adults who are brainwashed. I find it amusing that the term in English is helicopter parents. I guess it's about how they hover over you. In Sweden, we call it curling parents, as in the sport curling. It's a reference to the players with the brooms who sweep the way for the curling rock. In this analogy, the child is the curling rock and the parents are sweeping the path for them through life. We refer to the ones who remove all obstacles for their kids as snowplow parents. Usually, snowplow and helicopters are one and the same, but not always. Friends with a girl in elementary school who had parents who wouldn't let her watch PG movies at the age of 12, even with parental guidance. She wasn't allowed to come over to my house because I mentioned my favorite movie at the time to them and it wasn't G-rated. She nearly drowned at the beach a couple of years ago getting caught in a riptide, suffered permanent brain damage from a lack of oxygen. Her parents now have the forever child that they always wanted. I worked with a mother who didn't want her adult son with autism to ride the bus because she was afraid that child predators might get him. Like, lady, there are valid reasons to be concerned about your 21-year-old son riding the bus, but those guys aren't one of them. I had a father question everything about my lesson planning and teaching methods during a parent-teacher meeting. I was well prepared and I fielded his questions very well. After asking probably 50 questions, he looks around the classroom with a big smirk and says, "Sorry to ask so many questions. I'm what you call a helicopter parent." In response, I told him I was more than happy to give him weekly updates about his son, as well as spending my office hours to sit down with him to help further. His response? "Oh, I'm much too busy for that." Worst helicopter parent ever. I had a father who worked as an administrator at another school who would constantly send me emails questioning my teaching methods. His son was in my class. He was friends with my evaluating principal, so I was concerned that my job might be at risk and started responding with, "I'm not comfortable discussing this via email, but I would be happy to meet with you." Of course, he was always too busy to meet with me in person. Shortly after this, he accompanied me on a field trip, but said nothing about his concerns and didn't speak to me at all. He was on his cell phone the whole trip. The next year, he was arrested for inappropriate behavior with young teenage boys, and my evaluating principal had resigned. Yuck. I don't think this is in the same category as the other parent copters, but I should have figured that there would be at least one whose absurdity transgressed the line into straight-up creepiness. Probably an acquaintance of mine. This guy, quote, knows that his son is going to be a great NFL quarterback. The kid turned 10 recently and is a decent player, but his father has him work with different trainers and spend hours each day practicing. He takes vitamins, has a special diet, and isn't allowed to play other sports because his dad wants him to focus completely on football and doesn't want him to risk an injury playing another sport that would sideline him for football. He can't have sleepovers or do any normal kid things. I know for a fact that the kid has told his parent that he doesn't want to play anymore, but the dad doesn't care. He says that as a parent, he has to do what is best for his kid. My sons play sports too, and they don't always want to go to practice, so I understand making them stick with something they signed up for. My kids know that they have to finish out a season, but I'm perfectly fine if they don't want to sign up for the next one. I just don't understand why someone would continue to sign their kid up for something they clearly don't want to do. It's a situation that I can't see ending well, honestly. Living vicariously through your children, especially to this degree, is one of the most harmful things you can do to them. I hope this kid manages to break free. I really do. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. When I was a troop commander in the army, I had a kid who came up hot for white snow in the pea in a cup test, and then a week later was arrested by the local police department task force for being an enforcer in a local civilian military substance ring. They charged him and remanded him back to the army custody, where I immediately started the paperwork to chapter him out and let the civilian justice system take its course. The guy was 23, I think. His mum called me several times to tell me that Chris has never been in any real trouble before and he's such a sweet kid. Anytime anything happened in high school, I helped him work it out. I need to come up and talk with you and get this sorted out. I was dumbfounded. The guy was 23 years old, in the army, and his mum thinks she can come in and work it out with me. I was polite for the first call, but by the second or third phone call, I'd had enough. I told her, again, not to bother coming up to the installation, that her son wasn't a sweet kid, or else he wouldn't have beaten some guy up for not paying money he owed to a local dealer, and that the whole reason he was in this mess in the first place was because his mum had never let him be accountable for his actions. I told her that he was under my authority now, and I had no time or patience for someone who didn't take their obligation to the army, the country, or their buddies seriously enough to keep themselves out of trouble long enough to make our upcoming deployment to Iraq. When she complained that getting a dishonorable discharge would ruin his life, I informed her that fortunately I didn't have the time to waste giving him a dishonorable discharge, so he would be okay on that score. Other than honorable is what he wound up with, but the city of Harker Heights and the state of Texas might have more time than I did, so that was where she ought to focus her effort. She said I was being unfair and called my boss, which was fine by me. It blew my mind that a woman with a fully grown adult son in the army would think it was appropriate or healthy to call and talk to her son's commander about his multiple counts of misconduct and general failure to be an adult. But that, of course, is why he failed at being an adult in the first place. Teacher here. A friend of mine had a mum who came to lunch every day with her kid from kindergarten to, last I checked, 2nd grade. A little much, but the kicker is she used to spoon-feed him. This child had no issues, was completely capable of feeding himself, but she insisted on feeding him so she could monitor what he ate. A mother at a university parents' session explained how her son enjoyed reading before bed and would occasionally leave his light on. Being the considerate mother that she was, she didn't want to call to make sure he had turned his lights out, since that might wake him. She wanted to know if there was someone at the university that could check up on him every night. I love this. A lot of the others are over-the-top, blatant crazy, while this one is so wholesome and innocent, but also just so fricking unreasonable. It was me. I was 22 and had moved back from home a few months after my divorce, so I could save up enough money for an apartment. No credit, so it was $1,500 to move in. I went to visit an old friend 45 minutes away. She didn't use cell phones, so I told my mum I wouldn't be checking mine out of courtesy. But I would text when I got there and when I left. I got there, texted, and put my phone on silent. After a few hours, I got a bad feeling and checked my phone. My mum had checked the Find My Friends app, and it said I was in a drainage ditch. Funnily enough, it was right next to the restaurant we were eating at, because that app isn't always accurate, and said if I didn't call her, she'd call the police. I called her, and she had to hang up with the police to answer my call, because her adult daughter didn't answer the phone for a few hours after I'd warned her that I wouldn't. Had a really rich friend of a friend whose dad once picked him up in a helicopter. I run a huge book rental department for a good-sized university, 15,000 students. It's a beautiful program, 95% of our students' books are covered by one $85 fee. Anyway, I've seen some crazy stuff with parents. Honestly, there isn't enough space on Reddit for me to relay all the stories. My number one, however, is... It's move-in day, the worst day of the year, hundreds upon hundreds of students coming to get their books all at once. Most freshmen accompanied by their parents. This one lady marches up to the desk, pushing all other customers aside and dragging her mortified-looking son along by the hand. She then demands that I tell her how she get her son's books. I tell her the best way for your son to get his books is to use his class schedule and go find them himself, as he'll need to do this every semester moving forward. The aisles are alphabetical, and the courses arranged numerically once you find the right aisle. She tells me that she doesn't believe her son is capable of doing that. Now, at the time, I didn't expect to be staying as the manager of the department or employed by the university, so with nothing to lose, I said, "Then your son isn't capable of succeeding in college." And she lost it. Absolutely started flipping out, screaming that I called her son stupid. After her rage, I said, "I'm sorry, ma'am, but you're the one who suggested to me that your son is incapable of using the alphabet and numbers to perform a simple matching task. I was just going off the information you provided." She stared at me. "In other words, I'm pretty sure that you're the one who just called your son stupid when you told me that he's incapable of accomplishing a kindergarten-level skill." She throws another fit and then smashes the schedule into the kid's hand. He looks like he wants to die. She points off toward the shelves and tells him that she will be here if he needs her. Then she turns and glares at me with a "we'll see" look. I wish her a nice day and go back into my office and continue to observe the chaos of move-in day. Kid found his books in 5 minutes and tried to sneak out without her noticing. Sadly, her hover skill was greater than his sneak. She spotted him headed out the door and ran after him screaming his name.
I worked at IT at my college, and the number of mums I got to tee off made my day. I would literally get hundreds of calls on big registration days or the first weeks of classes asking how they log into our system to check their sons' and daughters' grades. I would have to explain, you can't. And when they demanded me to give them their sons' or daughters' passwords so they could get in or reset the password, I would explain FERPA laws to them. Seriously, they just need to let their children learn on their own. If they make a mistake, they can learn from it.
Was a TA once. The best is, have you tried talking to your kids in the least snarky tone of voice you can muster? Your child is a legal adult now and has their own privacy. We can't violate it by giving away personal information. Have you tried asking your son or daughter about their grades or assignments? I mean, personally, I can't think that they would change their methods if they got as far as their children going to college without coming in on some sort of effective communication strategy, but you never know. Good on you, TA. Was in court waiting to see the judge. Another case is going on about this high school senior hitting a kid with his car on campus. His mum goes up with him and the judge started asking questions and the mum answered them. The judge politely told her he'd like to hear from the son and she agreed. The boy started to explain what happened when she immediately cut him off, told him he was telling it wrong. She begins talking again and the judge, visibly annoyed now, asks her if she was there. No, but I know what happened,
she assured him. When the judge told her multiple witnesses claim that's not what happened, she called them liars who were just out to attack her boy. She continued to argue with everything the judge said, until he finally had enough of this woman interrupting him and had her removed. Eventual friend in high school. His mother was there every day, all day. Was a private school, day student. She walked with him to class, rehearsal, music lessons, the fricking bathroom. Took the entire year to get her to stop, he ended up hiding from her. This kid was brilliant. Perfect SAT scores, accomplished musician, amazing actor. We gave him his first soda, gum, etc. Father was an ex-priest who screwed the organist. Mother was an ex-nun. Both were bat crap crazy. We were all so proud when he went to college 800 miles away. Then it went very bad. Originally, the story was that he took his own life, which made no sense. Everything was going his way. Had full scholarship, escaped his parents, and even more amazing, a beautiful girlfriend. He redefined awkward. His mother kept insisting it was murder, that the mafia had killed him, but nobody believed her in the slightest. Fast forward a few years and a few unrelated criminal investigations, and yeah, it was the Russian mob. Apparently his girlfriend's father took a strong dislike to him when he said something unforgivable. Again, he redefined awkward, and had him killed. Well, that got dark fast. I think that's the first legitimate time I've heard someone actually get killed by the mob. I know, right? Been years and the absurdity hasn't waned. I had a mother start emailing me 10 minutes after her son left a job interview with me, then start calling for 3 days straight along with 5 or so emails a day, talking up her son and how perfect he was, and this job is a perfect fit and she would make sure he'd be there every day. Then she starts with the rules I would have to follow, such as he can't stay more than 5 minutes after 6 because she has to make dinner, and since she'd be driving him to and from every day, he mustn't be late. Then she starts asking if I could direct deposit his checks into her account so she can help him manage his money, etc. All this was going on without an inkling that I would offer him the job. She was just making these demands for him up front because this job would have to work around her schedule. Needless to say, I didn't hire him. He was a good fit too, but not with that baggage. For about a year or so, I took my daughter to an anxiety clinic to help her deal with a phobia she had developed. A certain amount of the therapy involved parents, or whoever had bought the kid, working with the child. The rest of the time, the parents hung out, waiting for their kids to finish the rest of the session, where the kids went elsewhere. One kid, Robert, had general anxiety, more or less. He'd quite clearly gotten it from his mother, who was a bit of a basket case, and would do stuff like staying up all night redoing his homework so it would be done right. That poor kid. I'd arranged to play golf with a few mates when we were all around 18. One guy gets driven to the course by his mum, but rather than just being dropped off, she parked the car and decided to wait with us until it was our turn to tee off the first hole. And then she decides that she had better stay and walk with us for the entire 4+ hours of golf. A guy in the next group sees what's going on and intervenes, saying, "Hey lady, non-players are not permitted on the course, so you'd better just go home and let your son play golf with his buddies in peace." Oh, I bet that went over real well with her.
The real MVP.
Reddit, how have you made a rude person's day worse? Excuse the change in voice, I am currently getting over COVID. Today on the train, I sat next to a woman who was angry that I sat next to her because she wanted the 2 seats to herself. As I sat there, She kept mouthing under her breath how she just wanted to sit there alone, blah blah blah. Despite the fact I wanted to tell her that it was public transportation and she needed to get over it, I kept my mouth shut. A few minutes later, a large woman with a large purse comes and stands in the same car I was in. I get her attention and tell her that she could have my seat. She huffs and puffs her way to me, and I help her sit down while grinning at the angry woman who was upset I'd sat beside her. I enjoyed watching her head almost explode from anger as the other large woman's rolls and purse pressed against her for the rest of the ride. Anyone else have any of those subtle revenge stories? Edit, this lady is a regular and is a known seat hog. I've seen her get into arguments before with people because she wants 2 seats to herself. Everyone pays to ride the train, so if there's a seat open, then it's up for grabs. I was working as a manager in a big nightclub about a year ago. I don't wear a uniform, but have a radio and run the security team. The venue has a great smoking section that looks out onto the street. One night, the venue was packed, so I did my usual roam making sure that there were no problems. However, it was too packed to walk through the smoking section, so I walked down the street instead, but could still very easily see into the smoking section. One guy stares me down, then calls me over and starts swearing at me for no reason, and telling me that, quote, pieces of crap like you could never even get into a venue like this. He obviously had no idea I was the manager. However, I didn't want to have security get into a fight inside with him. The guy kept telling me he would punch me out and stuff, and was clearly trying to look macho to impress someone. So I agreed and told him to come and meet me outside, and he could even have a free swing. He puts his drink down, takes off his jacket, and storms outside. Once he walked outside, I walked back inside and told security not to let him back in. The look on his face when he realized I ran the place was priceless, and then the realization that he couldn't get back into the club was amazing. It was the easiest and most fun removal I have ever done. I'm a manager at a grocery store, so I get awesomely rude customers on a daily. Every Wednesday is senior discount day. You have to be 55 to 60 to qualify for the discount. Needless to say, Wednesdays are tense. Lots of seniors and lots of other people who don't want to deal with the seniors. I don't generally mind the old folks. Most of them are pretty cool and have some interesting stories and cute jokes. This Wednesday, there was one particular customer who was being a huge pain in the butt from the moment she walked in. She was tall, blonde, high heels, very made up, and dressed to the nines. She was probably late 30s to early 40s. She came storming up to customer service. There are no parking spots. This is ridiculous. I'm going to request to corporate that you expand your parking lot since you don't seem to have the initiative to request that yourself. Off to a great start, lady. She comes storming back up about 45 minutes later. I am in a huge hurry, and every line has someone in it. I need to check out here. We had 3 lines open, and each one had one single customer. One. I say, no problem, but I'll get you at a checkout. You have too many items to get here. She has a huge hissy fit. I don't have time for this. Let's go. As I'm checking her out, it is constant whining. You only have one brand of makeup? That is ridiculous. I only wear MAC, but I was going to settle for Revlon, but you don't even have that. Now I have to make a whole separate trip. Please don't put my bread on top of my eggs. The eggs could roll over and crush the bread. Please bag my avocados separately. I need to use those for a face mask tonight. They need to be perfect. I have a photo session for work tomorrow. I'm in a magazine. She was unbelievable. Finally, at the end, I had enough. As she's about to pay, I say, don't forget today is senior discount day. You get 5% off. She just stared at me. What? I smiled broadly. Every Wednesday, senior citizens get 5% off their bill. I'll go ahead and take it off. You are 55 to 60, right? She is staring at me, debit card in hand, cheeks getting red. I lose my smile slowly and say, oh, you don't qualify? Sorry about that. Maybe next year. Thanks for your honesty. I haven't seen her in the store since. I used to work for the DMV, and the one I worked at had pretty limited parking. Surprise! I had left for lunch, came back, and was having a hard time finding a place to park. I finally found a spot, so I drove up to it and put my signal on showing that I was waiting for it. People, in my experience, usually respect this and continue on. Not this time. Just as the car was backing out, after I had waited a few minutes, a car came from the opposite side of the lot, made eye contact with me, and then shot right into the parking space. I was so mad because now I would be late after looking for a new spot. As I drove past the woman that had taken the spot, I just shook my head and she responded by shrugging her shoulders, smiling, mouthing the words, "Oh well," to me, and then ran her finger from her eye down her cheek as if to mock me crying about it. I continued into work, got in trouble for being late, but had actually forgotten about the incident until whose number gets called to my station but Miss Spot Stealer herself. The look on her face was priceless. Keep in mind that I'm not your average DMV worker. I understand that stuff happens and waive penalties all the time and treat my customers with respect because I believe that what goes around comes around, and I know how crappy it is to wait at the DMV all day. I'm usually so nice about getting penalties taken off people's accounts that I get in trouble for it at times. So, I greet Spot Stealer as nice as I would anyone else. In fact, it may have been nicer than it normally would be. She may have thought I didn't recognize her. Her registration is far past due, with hundreds due in penalties. I let her tell me her whole sob story and then finally tell her that she owes in full because she was aware of her due date. She argues it a little until, out of sight from my manager, I mouth the words, "Oh well," and drag my finger from my eye to my cheek, mocking her tears. At point, she puts her head down and proceeds to take out her card and pay the full amount. Because yes, we do take debit cards. What goes around, comes around. When I was working a crappy job in my younger days, a customer was upset that he had to wait in line like everyone else before being able to make his purchase. He actually said, "Do you know who I am? I own hotels." To which I replied, "Well, sir, I'm sorry, but this isn't Monopoly. This is Krispy Kreme." He was not pleased. Not even COVID can keep me from telling you to subscribe to Am I the Genius and Am I the Jerk, linked in the description below. As always, thanks for watching, and I promise I'll sound a lot better next time. I was sitting in my car taking some photos with my new smartphone while using different settings. Then there was this woman who had just stopped at a one-way street with only one lane. So she stands there for like 10 seconds doing nothing, and I thought this is very unusual. So I started to make a video. Another driver comes and honks. She then starts to reverse and hit the car of the other guy with their big BMW. 4 guys jumped out of the BMW and start yelling at the guy. You have to know in Germany, always the one who hits another car from behind will be blamed if he can't prove that it wasn't his fault. So we have a classic case of insurance fraud. The poor guy at the back was really worried because he knew he couldn't prove it. I just sit there in my car and waited for the police. Then I go outside and the police started to get the stories. Of course, there was 4 against 1. I just stood there and listened to the woman complaining about who this idiot hits her from behind and her brand new car is now damaged. After the police took the statement from both sides and even take my statement, they said there was no chance that 2 versus 4 could prove that he didn't do it. 2 of the guys at the BMW said they didn't know the girl and were pedestrians who saw it. That would increase the credibility. So they made all false statements to the police, and exactly that's the thing I wanted to happen. I then told the police, "Oh wait, there's just one thing," like Columbo style, and said that I have a video of what happened. I showed them to the police, and the women and the drivers just stand there with mouth open. You could not only see how she hits his car, but also that the quote, pedestrians were with the women in the car. The guy then hugs me, and we became good friends. Turns out he lives near me, and we spend the evening drinking and gaming. I'm in a massive line at a store. I'm next in line, but the person in front of me has a crap load of stuff. A helpful clerk sees the mess and opens another aisle saying, "I can help the next customer." Well, that's me. However, the checkout counter has 2 sides, a right and a left. It is set up for people to come to the right side, but the left can be used as well. As I am stepping over to her counter, this jerkwad from the very end of my line is sprinting to her counter, pushing people with his partner in tow. He arrives right before me. They have a mountain of items in their cart, which he starts throwing on the checkout counter. I am standing there on the other side with my one item burning with rage. Checkout girl waits until he stacks all of his crap on the counter, looks at me, looks at him, and says to him, "I'm sorry, sir. You're on the wrong side. You'll have to go to the end of the line," which is now massive. I put on my biggest grin, made eye contact with him as long as possible, and loudly told the clerk how awesome she was. Just the other day, I was at a Chinese buffet, and the 3 people in the booth next to me were questioning the waitress. She appeared to be Asian Hispanic, about voting for the president and who she planned to vote for. She had trouble understanding them and communicating that she could not vote. They immediately began taunting her that she shouldn't be here if she couldn't vote, that she didn't even know who the president of the United States is, and then took a picture and said they would post it on Facebook. I later found out the waitress was on a school visa and couldn't vote, but was unable to convey that to them. After the waitress walked off, one of the girls at the table, the one who took the pic, looked up and asked me where I worked because I looked familiar. When I replied, the local university in the social work department, she commented that she had recently been in my office to apply to our program, to which I replied, "Yes, I remember you, and I'm also on the admissions committee," followed with a wink. The color drained from her face, and she knew she was screwed. Karma's a jerk. TLDR, I provided unsolicited marriage counseling services to a jerkwad. I worked at a hotel several years ago and had to deal with insufferable pricks about a dozen times a day. Hotel stories about Billy Mays watching granny adult films, a person that threw hot coffee in my face, a person that spit on me, and a crazy lady that slapped me are in my comment history. The best/most evil revenge I ever got was on a guy that stayed with us 4 days a week for the entire 5 years I worked at the hotel. The big utility company in our area was having financial issues, and he was the leader of the auditing team that was sent in to straighten it out. Anyway, I would interact with the guy at least a few times every day I worked, and he was always very rude and condescending. As an example, one of his coworkers would ask me for a local restaurant recommendation, and he would chime in with, "Yeah," because minimum wage workers are known for their taste in fine dining. If someone asked me for something personal, he would say something like, ask him what life choices he made to be here plunging toilets and writing down my preferred wake-up call time. Maybe he can share his wisdom so we all avoid his fate. Stuff like that. He was just a jerk to everyone on the hotel staff and was always very demanding. Since I saw him every day, I noticed that he had developed a relationship with one of the younger women on his auditing team. I saw the romance blossom from flirting to full-on groping and grinding in the hotel lobby. One day, he had just finished delivering one of his delightfully crappy bon mots to me, and I was fuming. Then he screamed at one of my coworkers because she had a Filipino accent, and he said he only wanted his room cleaned by, quote, white Americans. I vowed revenge. His wife called in to speak to him later that night, like she usually did, and I said, "Oh, I think he's sleeping in Mrs. Blank's room tonight. One moment, please." And then I connected his wife to her room. His wife must not have told him what I had said, because he didn't try to get me fired. They got a divorce. They didn't have kids, but according to another guy on the auditing team, his wife got the house and custody of their dog. He stopped staying with us shortly after the phone call. I was riding my bike to work one day, and when crossing a street, in the legal zone with the walk sign, a woman ran me over. She drove through the crosswalk looking to turn right and ran right into me. She stopped after I got bumped hard enough by her fender to take a spill and have some bruising all down my side. She gave me an exasperated, "my bad" wave and continued to talk on her cell phone, ignoring me as I picked myself and my bike up. I walked right up to her open window, grabbed her cell phone from her ear, and chucked it into a nearby parking lot as hard as I could. I swear that was the farthest I have thrown anything in my life. She gaped at me in shock as I struggled back onto my bike and slowly rode off, fuming yet victorious. Then a half-mile farther on my trek, I got attacked by a goose. Not my best day. TLDR, woman hit me with her car, got revenge, got attacked by goose. Edit, those who have pointed out that riding a bike in a crosswalk is not legal are correct. In this particular instance, it was not a sidewalk but a designated bike path. They had a normal walk signal at an intersection, but I believe it was still acceptable to ride across as it was a bike-specific path. I could be wrong though. I work in local theater, and we have a lot of rude, awful women who are part of local ballet schools come through our venue who are the mothers of the dancers. Once, this woman rang up wanting seats to an almost sold-out ballet performance that had been on sale for 4 months the day before the show and did nothing but abuse me for 5 minutes because she left buying them too late. Whined about how she shouldn't have to pay for her kids, whined that we should get a bigger venue, it seats just under 500, then put me on hold while she rang 3 of her relatives to see if they wanted seats too. She was positively awful. The seats I was about to sell her were the only ones in the theater left, and there were good seats. While I'm on hold, a grandma of one of the ballerinas comes to the desk and asks if we have any seats left, as she'd been in hospital and couldn't buy them earlier, but said she'd understand if we were booked out. I put the phone with the on-hold music down and sold this old lady the last seats for the show and gave her an invite to our next year's dance season for her granddaughter and herself, so she'd know exactly when all the important dates were coming. She thanked me over and over, and she's now one of our regulars and brings her grandkids to our shows. 2 minutes after the old lady leaves, the jerk on the other end finally takes me off hold and says she wants the remaining seats that we have left. I tell her, "Sorry, we've just sold out while you had me on hold, I'm afraid. Better luck next year. Anything else I can help you with?" She was choking with rage on the other end of the phone. It was fantastic. I watched a lazy shopper park their grocery cart right behind another person's car instead of putting it in the cart return. I got out of my car, ran up and moved the cart, and put it behind her car. I then ran off and watched her have to get back out of her car since she couldn't back out, and then finally proceed to put up her cart the right way. I felt like a champion of the people. Saw a woman with her husband toss a squash into a cooler that they apparently didn't want anymore. As they walked away, I picked up the squash and followed them. They left their cart for a moment, so I put the squash into their cart and walked away. She had a dumbfounded look on her face when she noticed it back in her cart. I put it in a very noticeable place and proceeded to put it on a nearby shelf, and they walked away. I, of course, took it off the shelf and followed them again, doing a drive-by drop-off of the squash. At this moment, my girlfriend got fed up with my antics and made me stop. I would have done it until they gave up and bought the squash, or I was caught. I'm very easily amused. Heard this from a DJ in my hometown. He's pushing his cart of groceries out of the store and over to his car when a woman pulls into the handicap spot in front of the store. No placard, no handicap plates. Jumps out of the car without so much as a limp and heads into the store. He gives her this stink eye about taking up a handicap spot, and she snarls, "Deal with it," and sashays into the store. This guy is mad. He sees a couple cops who were leaning against their cars talking. They hadn't seen it, so he goes over and tells them the story. They smile and say they'll handle it. He puts his groceries in his car, and as he's pushing his cart back to the store to put it in the rack, good guy DJ, he says the cops have blocked the lady's car with theirs and were leaning against their car waiting for her. As he's putting his cart in the rack, the lady comes out of the store with her purchase, sees the cops, and almost craps herself. The fine in California is $250 to $500 for a first offense. Priceless. He walks over to her and says, "I dealt with it." Female Redditor. I was out at the local watering hole having a few beers with a group of friends. The group became larger and larger with time. After a while, I got semi-separated from my fiancé. I was introduced to a guy. We'll call him Bob. The introduction went like this. "Bob, this is psychocentric. Psychocentric, Bob." To which he says, "Every psychocentric I've ever met is a slut and unfaithful." Now, I don't get bent out of shape without good reason, so I just brush it off as drunk banter, or maybe a recent breakup with a psychocentric and say, "Well, I neither, but nice to meet you anyway, Bob," and shook his hand. The rest of the night, he would go to the bar, walk back, and give me the stink eye. For whatever reason, he didn't like me. The feeling was becoming mutual. I decided ignoring him would probably be best. He was certainly not in his right mindset, right? A few hours passed, and I was sitting by his female friend, having fun talking and giggling. He puts his elbows on the table in between us, staring at me like I had done him wrong somehow. I just kept on with our conversation and ignored him. He then puts his nasty face right next to mine and says, "So, are you a slut?" My temper and alcohol got the best of me, and I yelled, "No, and what is your problem exactly? I've been doing my best to ignore you. Get a clue." He then chest bumped me and said, "Do you want to go?" I'm all for equal rights, but this was the first time an able-bodied adult male has asked me, a girl, if I wanted to throw down. I walk over a few steps to my fiancé, who was talking to a bouncer friend of ours, and said, "This guy says he wants to kick my butt," while the douche just keeps advancing. The bouncer looks at him, gives a hand signal, and soon 5 red shirts, bouncer uniforms, surround him. He was, quote, escorted out of the bar and went to his minivan, drunk. I called work. I work for the sheriff's department. They got a good tip on a sure thing DUI. I might not have thrown down, but I think I won that round.
Teachers and professors, what was the most insane paper that you ever had to grade? This was my history class. We just spent 2 weeks on World War II, and the kids were supposed to write a summary essay on the major events. This one kid genuinely believed that World War II lasted 2 days. The Germans bombed Pearl Harbor, and the next day America nuked Tokyo.
Well, duh. Why else would it be called World War II? Because it lasted 2 days.
Wait, so World War III will take up my entire weekend and then some? The Secretary of War?
Mr. President, the Germans just bombed Pearl Harbor.
President Donald F. Eisenreagan?
Nuke Tokyo. But sir, it was Germany. Exactly. They'll never expect it.
I'm an English teacher, but this was when I was a TA for Latin American Studies class. The final paper was to be a research project about any Central American, South American, or Caribbean country of the student's choosing. The topic was open, just had to be about something in one of these countries. One student turns in her first draft, the whole thing is about the country of Madagascar. When we told her it didn't fit the requirements of the assignment, she accused us of being too scared of the part where she discusses graveyards in Madagascar.
In my high school Spanish class, we had to do presentations on Spanish-speaking countries so we could learn about their culture. Also in my class was a guy who was super obsessed with soccer, who after weeks of working on this project, gets up and gives a full presentation on Brazil. The second sentence out of his mouth was, "The national language is Portuguese," and he just gave a presentation on famous players. As he goes to sit down, another guy in my class just goes, "Nice presentation on a Spanish-speaking country, man."
This was in my science class, year 8, so ages 12 through 13, fairly simple general science end-of-term test. The kid had clearly decided to heed the advice to attempt all questions as we didn't use negative marking, so for every answer he didn't know, he just wrote tubes. The best thing was that this included a question near the end of the paper that asked for a description of how blood was pumped around the body. I gave him half a mark.
Well, maybe he vaguely remembered someone mentioning tubes and figured it must be relevant to at least one of the questions.
It's sort of the equivalent of picking C for multiple choice. It's bound to be right some of the time. If that's an equivalent, it's a very loose one. Taking the same formula that might net you a 33% correct answer rate and instead using one component of God knows how many answers available in the field of science is truly a leap of faith. My parents graded GCSE papers every summer. One year, my mum got an English essay exam on which the kid had written,
"I don't understand the question, so I'm going to write you a poem,"
followed by said poem and an elaborate drawing of a tropical island. He got a D. I teach chemistry, and my kids write one big paper as a write-up after a long lab. Anyway, I had this one student, let's call him Joe, who was a pain in my butt. Constantly late, disrespectful to his classmates and me, often just ditched so he was way behind. Anytime I'd call on him during his class, his answer would be hydrogen. We could be talking about molecular structure, I'd call on Joe to tell me how a transition metal like iron was structurally different from a halogen, and still that's what he'd shout. Fast forward to the end of the year and the long lab write-up. All the kids, including Joe, have done the lab. I give rubrics, clear guidelines on what to expect them to discuss, and a deadline. Deadline comes and they're all submitted through Google Classroom. I start reading, I'd made it through about 10 of them and they're okay. The kids give it a decent shot. Then I get to Joe's essay. He'd literally typed the sentence, "The answer is always hydrogen," hundreds of times. Enough to reach the page-length requirement, and he had done it with the correct headers for each section too. I was impressed with the amount of effort that had been put into screwing his grade away. Most of the kids in that class were sophomores in high school. If I remember correctly, he earned the 5 points for correct formatting, and that was it. So he scored 5 out of 100. Definitely didn't pass that paper. I also allow kids to redo work, and he never took me up on that. This truly is my time. I was a teacher in high school. I taught some lower achieving kids in an English class. They were around 14 to 16 years old. One kid, Paul, was particularly bad. Not through a lack of intelligence, but effort. Paul is also a native English speaker. This is important to remember. Paul did not submit his persuasive essay when it was due, and continued to fail to submit it for another month and a half. I kept reminding him, phoning home, emailing other staff, etc. Paul, who was the only pupil who didn't submit an essay, believed I was picking on him and singling him out. Finally, in what I can only imagine in a fit of sudden inspiration linked to his belief, I received the following unceremoniously submitted 400-word masterpiece. Is teacher bias? Perhaps. Yes, he wrote perhap. It was all typed in a funky, bold, jagged font. Here is a brief summary and extract. Is teacher bias? Perhap. In my experience, teacher is very biased towards me for no reason. It went on about what he understood to be the faults in the teaching profession for most of it. However, another particular highlight was where he stated, teachers can be racist, as reports have found. He proceeded to never reference this or go into detail about racism or reports ever again. Paul was also white, just putting that out there. I still freaking have that essay. I once was in an English class with several papers that had to be peer-reviewed. One of my classmates wrote a 15-page paper that was, for the most part, barely comprehensible. But the real kicker was that she directly quoted Santa Claus 2. In a final paper for a college-level senior capstone, a real person quoted the 2002 Tim Allen Christmas comedy Santa Claus 2. We also had to discuss each other's papers in class afterwards. Awkward. I genuinely laughed aloud at this. I have to know, what was the quote? Seeing isn't believing, believing is seeing. Well, it's weird they picked the second one because I'm pretty sure they say that in the first movie too. I had a student who wrote about the right to, quote, bear, spelt B-A-R-E, arms. For some of the paper, he was talking about concealed carry laws and he was for it. Then he started arguing against the Second Amendment. Then he started talking about women wearing short-sleeved shirts. This was a college-level class. I still have photos of this paper, though I've lost the original copy. It's glorious. I read it to all new friends. Geography teacher here. I teach 18-year-olds. I had assigned a scientific paper for about 5 pages long. Topic was chosen from among the chapter on space. Had a student write it on the subject of the moon. Went off on the good start, different theories of how the moon came into existence, then suddenly she switched into astrology. It was so smooth I didn't notice until a full paragraph in. I had to explain to her why she failed. One of my classmates once wrote and presented on this wacky jumble of conspiracy theories about the Illuminati. The paper was bad, but the presentation was awkward as frick. He was doing numerology on the chalkboard to demonstrate that the Pope was actually the Antichrist and that George Bush was one of his minions. It would have been funny, but I'm pretty sure he was schizophrenic. Everyone just got really, really quiet, including the professor. There was this girl who wrote about how the English language was only partially accessible to women. Not like that men had dominated the English language in terms of publishing or less censorship, but as in there are words and phrases that are 100% incomprehensible to women because of genetic differences between men and women. Did she have any explanations for why she thought this? She couldn't because she's a woman. There's actually a communication theory called muted group theory that basically proposes this premise. It suggests that because language was created by men, they have the upper hand in expressing themselves, and women are limited not only in their language, but their view of the world due to the language at their disposal. It also suggests that there are some experiences that are uniquely female that they are unable to express due to having a lack of vocabulary, since language was designed by men. I'm not a huge fan of this theory, and I'm not a critical scholar in the least, but it does exist and some people find merit in it. I was a creative writing English major, and for the most part we had to peer review our classmates' work. We had to provide positive criticisms. Early on, it became apparent that some people were majoring in creative writing because it was an easy A. I remember critiquing some papers, and the only positive thing that I could come up with was, "I like your punctuation?" That made my teacher laugh out loud in class. These quotation marks, how beautiful yet simplistic. They speak of your past, your future, how you live your life. Your entire being clearly went into these exceptional quotation marks. A friend of mine took a creative writing class, and according to him, he had to peer review stories someone wrote about their persona, and also a Sword Art Online fanfic. I don't know if the same student wrote both. Oof, I'm hit by secondhand embarrassment of that. I'd be way too shy or sensible to write about personas in college. It's good to see that my classmates remember me this far along in life. The narrator is joking, by the way. I'd also like to inform you for the next story that I'm going to be saying the word congenital. I need you to mentally remove the con part of the words so that you can both understand the next part and get this past the YouTube censors. I had a student in freshman comp who was in her final research report based off the novel Frankenstein using the thesis, "Congenital manipulation of human beings in laboratories is wrong because God says so." No, that's not a typo, congenital manipulation. Apparently she'd used find and replace because that was the way it was through the whole 8-page paper. She clearly meant genetic manipulation, but every single instance of the phrase Genetic manipulation had been replaced with congenital manipulation. After I hauled myself out from under the desk of my office where I'd slid because I was crying with laughter, I really did read the paper. Apart from the crappy thesis, the paper had not had a single decent source, no real arguments, and the organization was chaotic at best. Worst part? I'd had multiple individual conferences throughout the semester with the students to work on thesis statement and developing arguments. She had never bothered to come to a single one and was teed off when I failed her. This one's priceless. I keep a whole file of such beauties from my student papers. And yes, I'm an English professor. Here's a couple. So You Want to Be President is a copulation of little thought about facts concerning the 41 American presidents. Wuthering Heights is a novel written in the Victorian era, but that excretes many of the symptoms of a romantic piece of literature. Children are at such a venerable young age. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was in a master's program for the last 2 years, and I had to peer review a classmate's paper. Holy crap. We were supposed to write a persuasive research essay on an effective way to make college more affordable. I was lucky enough to peer review a classmate and co-worker who already possessed not 1, but 2 master's degrees, and he was somehow on his way to a doctorate. I'm honestly still perplexed trying to figure out how he got those other 2 degrees. Anyways, the paper was littered with grammatical errors. My favorite of those was when he started making up words and talked about the problem of student indebtedness. He probably meant indebtedness, but he used it incorrectly multiple times, so make what you will of that. He also referred to the student debt problem as an extra layer on students' frustration cake. Yep, this person was a veteran, and at one point in the paper he talked about the terror events of 9/11/11. I understand that's a single number typo, but also if you're going to state that as your reason for joining the military, at least proofread it like you care about what happened that day. The good part, however, was his actual argument. For some reason, he was arguing that college should be more affordable, but only for veterans. You know, like what the GI Bill does. He said that we could make this happen by simply cutting the salaries of professors and giving that money back to the students. We're going to save colleges and universities in America by failing to pay our professors, everyone. Just the way he wrote indebtedness tells me how he's already had 2 masters. I worked with a nurse once who was horribly lazy and an all-round bad nurse and a miserable person. We looked her up online to see how she possibly managed to get through nursing school. We found her resume where she repeatedly referred to herself as a register nurse. Then we asked another nurse we knew how she made it through school. They went to the same university. That nurse told us they tried to kick her out over and over, but she had threatened to sue them, like she did everybody at work. So yeah, a college education doesn't necessarily mean anything. Math teacher in our school graded an IB/SL math examination, and out of 90 marks on the test, she was able to award 1 mark. It wasn't for lack of trying either. Whoever wrote the exam tried a solid amount of the exam, except they literally didn't get anything but 1 question right. Current English professor. I can't think of a single worst, but here are some crazy ones in my Hall of Fame. Number 1. When I taught 8th grade, I had to insist that a photo of a koala bear off Google Images would not serve as a proper paper title. 2. Just a sad one. One student really slacked off on a paper with a fully MLA formatted first page, 2 sentences and an "I'm sorry, Mrs. Lancer." 3. The paper wasn't bad, but despite going over APA title pages at length in class, I had a student who turned in their APA paper with a teal and turquoise book-like MS Word cover template that was gaudy and had very little of the required info. 4. I can think of many where the writing was just poor or didn't have proper grammar, but one goof from a recent semester sticks out in terms of errors in writing. The student did a good poetic analysis of the poem "Because I Could Not Stop for Death," cited it correctly as by Emily Dickinson, yet all throughout the paper referred to the poet as Elizabeth Dickerson. Also, in one that doesn't at all count amongst my worst, but maybe one of my most memorable, I assigned a paper with the goal of arguing successfully for both sides, then mediating it as an advancement of lessons in argumentation. Most students chose from a list of very serious and difficult-to-solve problems, but one student requested to do a paper on the "Are hot dogs sandwiches?" debate. It was an impeccable paper that did reach a nice mediation, but it was also incredibly memorable among papers on substance epidemics and immigration questions. I was a chemistry TA, and a lot of the students would include silly details like how much they liked a lab partner in their first report of the year. One student took this to the next level by writing out a log of his whole day before doing the experiment. What he had for breakfast, the bus he took to class, how he was 3 minutes early. Everything. This was at the university level. I once had a student turn in a paper that was a little shy of the length requirement at a first glance, then I started reading it. It was the same several paragraph, original passage repeated over and over, sometimes with slight variations, for the whole length of the paper. Not a teacher, but I peer-reviewed the essay or short story of a classmate of mine in my junior year of high school. We were supposed to write about a historical event from the perspective of someone who was there. For example, I wrote about the perspective of a court stenographer in one of the McCarthy trials. This girl decided to write about the first Olympic Games, but seemed to have a basic lack of understanding of history. Her story, which again was about the first Olympic Games from the perspective of an athlete, involved texting, cars, and was absolutely laden with pop culture references. In addition to this, every I was lowercase and the whole essay was center justified, because of course it was. I'm not sure if I'm remembering that part correctly, but I swear it was in Comic Sans or something like that. I didn't want to tell her that the entire story was terrible because I'm weak, so I just told her to check her capitals and punctuation and things like that. God, peer-reviewing someone's awful work is the worst. I don't know if it's necessary, but I always feel the need to tiptoe on direct issues like, oh, I don't think they actually had all that stuff back in 1896. I just want to tell them, I'm not trying to make any enemies, but your paper makes me want to commit Sudoku. I don't know if that last word was a typo or an intentional joke, but thank you, dear writer. Thank you very much. Now take the A- and get out of my sight. I'm studying to be an English teacher and had to do group peer reviews with classmates. One girl didn't have a thesis, didn't have any clear arguments, and had a 3-page paper that was 2 paragraphs long. The paper was supposed to be a proposal of how to fix an issue in higher education, and I couldn't even figure out what her problem was, and she had no proposal. The best part? After her and her friend went for the peer review, they left, leaving me and another girl to finish alone. When we got to the part to list feedback from our group, we both left clear comments about how our group left us. Not a professor, but I had to peer review a bit for my scientific writing course in my first year of college. It was a level 200 class, so there were a few sophomores and juniors. The way how it worked was that at the beginning of the semester, our professor had assigned us to do groups of 6. During the peer review sessions, she would staple the papers together according to group number and give it to different groups so we wouldn't grade our own group's papers. Around midterms, we had to write a mock proposal for a scientific field of our choice. Had to be at least 6 pages long with headings, abstracts, materials, hypothesis, etc. The one who wrote the best proposal got a Dunkin' Donuts gift card. I found one of the juniors' proposals and, oh my god. She only wrote 2 pages, had no discernible format, used a typewriter font, had no headings, and it was just her blabbering on about how herbal medicine helped her mental illness. There wasn't any real conclusion because from what I could tell, she didn't even have a hypothesis. There was so much wrong with the paper that I just moved on without writing anything. The real kicker is that she always promoted her self-published book on our class discussion board. I won the gift card, though. I'm not a teacher, but I've read a ton of people's essays trying to help them edit. Holy crap, have I read some stupid papers. Here's a few excerpts from an essay I tried to edit but had to give up on. The essay was supposed to be about how people can be greedy. I don't quite know. Title: The Greedy Money Sharks and Fair Fishers. What's the meaning of greed as a selfish desire for something for power, good, and wealth? ? I told him to define greed. Defining your terms is important and he'd get marked off if he didn't. 1 points me and the guys had a guys' night, which we have a great time just being guys. Unfortunately, on that night there was the guy who was our friend but now he's acquaintance because he activates his middle finger move. This one's just hilarious. Every time I try to read this aloud to my friends, I burst out laughing and can't finish the sentence. For example, my rich friend went on a date with a Canadian girl. What did my rich friend had a good time with his date? Then unlucky event happened, he went to the bathroom because of the reason that doesn't involve with ditching. My friend accidentally drops his wallet and he went to the bathroom. She grabs his wallet and left the restaurant. My friend came back surprised and realized he lost his wallet. In other words, he's broke as heck and washes the dishes instead of sending him to jail. Ever since that date, he never dates a Canadian person or travels to Canada because in his point that Canadians are thieves. Maybe his friend is just stupid. So group tells the guy to pay the full share. The man disagrees, then he ran out of chills.
and never seen again only until tomorrow. Never seen again? But then they saw him the next day. Although the tactic of avoiding paying the bill, full stop. Another way is to enhance their beauty within their appearance. For example, my cosplayer friend, Redacted. A cosplayer is a person who dresses up as the character related to anime, cartoon, or video games. She always looks elegant and beautiful outfit of a character she cosplays as. When she wears her normal clothes, she still looks cute and natural. One night we get our boba drinks from a shop called Redacted, so I and Redacted ordered our drinks. I looked at her, she looks happy in a pretty way, then glanced at me. My cheeks started to get red. So I told her that I would pay for our drinks. I asked her why she has to look cute. She replied, "It's to make guys pay for my stuff and someone who I'd like." I kind of felt angry that she used me, but I was curious about the person who she liked. On the way to Redacted's house, I asked her, "So who do you like?" When we arrived at her house, she turns around and went to me, then pushed her smooth lips to my lips. Redacted steps back and replied, "I love you, baka." Baka means in Japanese is a fool. For example, people always take advantage of their men related to money. The woman's point of view of men are personal money spenders, and some men's point of view towards people is some kind of powerful god or someone in royalty. My thought on this subject are slavery and women being cheap. That be another way to avoid paying is take advantage of your date and act like you're a spoiled royal brat. A woman who would do that, which is my mother because she doesn't work but take care of my sister but her husband does all the work. The worst part of my mother that she begs for money from me because I'm her child. He doesn't have a job and all of his money comes from his parents. This was written by a freshman in college. For a lesson one time, we were supposed to grade some AP tests to get an idea of what the test would be like. The prompt was like, tell about an achievement you made, or something. I received a paper that went something like this. Growing up, I loved basketball. I would play it all the time. I really enjoyed the game, and I still play it now. I play basketball during the day. Sometimes I play basketball during the night too. Basketball is fun to play. Just on and on. About 100 different ways to say they play basketball. Anyways, I gave it a 2, 1 being the lowest and 5 being the highest, only due to the fact that it had no grammatical errors. Turns out the person received a frickin' 4. Taught at community college. Last paper for English 102 was an argument paper. I stated on the directions no stupid arguments like the Holocaust or the latest school shooting didn't happen. Student turns in a paper denying the school shooting that Alex Jones was recently in court for also denying. Gave her a 55%, which was an F, which put her final grade at an F because of a whole bunch of other crap the nut did and didn't do in class. One of the sentences was something along the lines of, "Who can blame the crisis actors for doing what they did? Every person just tries to help themselves." My time has come. I teach 10th grade English. One girl wrote the world's worst paper. It was incoherent, 5 pages long, had no claim, and was mostly plot summary. It was unreadable. I hated every second of it. I didn't know how to grade it, so I handed it to my co-teacher and was like, "You deal with this mess." He gave her a 55, which was generous. "So this is a failing paper, right?" We handed it back. I thought it was over. A different student turned in a paper, like a week late. I started grading the paper, I reached the second page, and I had this horrible epiphany. It was the same horrible paper. I couldn't compare the two papers because I didn't have the original, but it was the same unreadable garbage. I stopped reading, gave the second version a 45, and moved on. Then, an entirely different student who is not friends with either of the original students turned in a paper. It was like 2 weeks late, but I agreed to grade it. I got halfway through the first sentence before I realized it was the same gosh darn horrible paper. I almost died. These were all handwritten, so each student rewrote by hand all 5 pages of garbage. I know they were all copied because they had the same weird spelling errors. I have no idea why any of them thought distributing and copying a paper that had already failed would work. So I had to reread the exact same piece of garbage paper 3 times and it was so unpleasant. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.